What if we weren't the first? Not the first to build, to dream, to fall. Buried deep beneath the Earth's crust, beyond bones, beyond memory, lies a question that shakes the very core of human pride. The Silurian Hypothesis dares to ask, could an advanced civilization have existed millions of years before us and vanished without a trace? It sounds like science fiction, but top scientists have explored it seriously. If a pre-human species reached technological heights, would we even know? Fossils crumble, cities erode. In 100 million years, would we leave behind anything at all? Beneath the concrete and chaos of modern life, under the roots of forests and the floors of oceans, something ancient slumbers. Not bones or relics, not statues weathered by time, but silence. A silence that hums with possibility. Imagine the Earth not as a timeline, but as a manuscript rewritten again and again, where each civilization is a fading layer of ink. Could one of those layers tell a story we've never heard? Geology is a patient storyteller. It speaks in the slow, grinding movements of tectonic plates and the delicate imprint of a fern fossilized in stone. It measures time not in years, but in eons. To it, human civilization is a flicker, a spark in the dark. And when we dig into the crust of our planet, what we find isn't just history. It's prehistory. It's mystery. It's the unspoken question behind every layer of sediment. What else was here before us? This is where the Silurian Hypothesis enters, not with fanfare or conspiracy, but with quiet, scientific wonder. Named with a nod to a sci-fi species from the British TV show Doctor Who, it asks a bold, unsettling question. If an industrial civilization had existed on Earth millions of years before humans, could we even tell? It doesn't claim such a civilization did exist. It simply asks, what if it had? What traces would remain? Would time have swallowed them whole? This isn't the realm of ancient aliens or hidden Atlantis. The Silurian Hypothesis doesn't invoke spacecraft or superpowers. It deals in climate cycles, geochemical fingerprints, and the subtle traces that even modern humanity might someday leave behind. It's a thought experiment grounded in scientific methods, authored by respected researchers like Dr. Gavin Schmidt and Dr. Adam Frank. Its questions stretch far beyond fringe speculation and directly into the heart of how we understand time, memory, and ourselves. Let's pause for a moment. Think about how little of our own civilization might remain after 10 million years. Cities are temporary. Metals corrode. Plastics degrade. Even radioactive waste disperses eventually. The Earth recycles itself constantly through erosion, subduction, biological decay. In 100 million years, our highways might be seams of curious rock. Our skyscrapers, vapor. Even our satellites will burn or fall. So now, reverse that thought. If a different species had reached industrial complexity long before us, say 50 or 100 million years ago, what would survive? Would we find twisted metal beneath coal seams? Fossilized machines? Perhaps not. But we might find anomalies, climate shifts, unexplained carbon spikes, abrupt changes in sediment layers, things that, in hindsight, could be evidence, or at least hints, of something more. Some of these anomalies already exist. The Paleocene-Eocene thermal maximum, about 56 million years ago, was a sudden global warming event that left a strange carbon signature. No one knows precisely what caused it. Natural processes? Volcanoes? Methane releases? Or could it be the ghost of an earlier industry? The hypothesis doesn't argue definitively. It merely asks us to look with new eyes. And here's where the idea becomes quietly radical. Because if we can't rule out the possibility of a prior civilization, not due to lack of evidence, but because time itself erases it, then we must reevaluate our entire sense of permanence. Human beings like to imagine that monuments and technology will outlast us. But what if civilization, Any civilization is just a seasonal bloom on Earth's ancient surface. Beautiful, brief, forgotten. It's a humbling thought, and a hopeful one too. Because maybe we're not alone, not in the cosmic sense, but in the historical. Maybe the Earth has grown minds before. Maybe intelligence is not a fluke, but a rhythm. Of course, there's no proof of a Silurian society, no buried cities, no fossils of humanoid engineers. But that's the point. The Earth, over tens of millions of years, is a master of disguise. Entire mountain ranges have risen and eroded since the time of the dinosaurs. Oceans have come and gone. Continents have drifted apart. In such a vast theatre, what kind of traces could anyone leave behind? Picture time not as a line, but as a vast, ancient book, one where most pages are missing, others are smudged, and only the last few chapters are legible. We read from the back, guessing at the story that came before. And sometimes we find a strange phrase, a piece of punctuation that doesn't fit. The Silurian Hypothesis asks, what if those anomalies are footnotes from an earlier reader? This is not about proving something wild, it's about expanding our imagination responsibly, about understanding that civilization, ours or anyone else's, is not the end point of nature, but perhaps a recurring phenomenon, one that rises, burns bright, and fades, leaving behind whispers in the rocks. It also forces us to consider what kind of legacy we will leave. If we vanish tomorrow, how will future beings, if they come, know we existed? Will our plastic remain? Will our atmosphere bear our fingerprints? Or will we too be a vanished chapter, speculated upon by minds we'll never meet? And so we begin our journey, not just through time, but through sediment, myth, and memory. We'll dive into geological records, explore the motivations behind this hypothesis, and sift through the evidence left by fire, flood, and fossil. Because to ask what if we weren't first is really to ask, how much don't we know about the world beneath our feet? In 2018, two scientists at the cutting edge of climate and planetary science did something unexpected. Adam Frank and Gavin Schmidt, both well-respected researchers in their respective fields, ventured into uncharted intellectual territory. They weren't exploring new planets or tracking the Earth's atmospheric shifts. Instead, they were asking a very peculiar question. What if humans weren't the first technological civilization on Earth? It's a question that, at first glance, might seem like the stuff of science fiction. But these weren't amateur theorists, nor was this some wild claim pulled from a late-night talk show. Frank and Schmidt were researchers at NASA, the very institution that maps the future of humanity in space. Why then would they entertain such an idea? Their professional focus was climate change, the Earth's atmosphere, and the long-term habitability of our planet. Yet, as they peered into the deep past, they couldn't help but ask, could another, earlier civilization have existed on Earth? Could evidence of it have been lost to time? In many ways, their inquiry is born from the same curiosity that drives the exploration of other worlds. As we look at distant planets in search of life, we're also trying to understand what it takes for a civilization to survive long enough to leave traces behind. When Frank and Schmidt asked their question, they were thinking not just about us, but about any intelligent species. Could a civilization evolve on a planet only to disappear, leaving no trace? If this happened before, might it happen again? The roots of their thought experiment trace back to an inspiration that feels both ancient and modern: science fiction. The Silurian Hypothesis, named after the Doctor Who TV series, draws its title from the fictional Silurians, a race of intelligent ancient reptiles who once ruled Earth before being wiped out by a cataclysm. In the show, the idea of lost civilizations existing before humanity captures the imagination with its vivid portrayal of forgotten histories and advanced technologies. Frank and Schmidt, however, didn't indulge in fantastical creatures. Instead, They used the Doctor Who concept as a metaphor for a much more grounded question. How much of Earth's past could have been hidden by time and geological forces? The difference between a hypothesis and a theory is subtle but important. A hypothesis is an idea waiting to be tested. It's not a statement of fact. Rather, it's a thought experiment, an invitation to explore possibilities. In science, hypotheses are built on existing knowledge and used to guide further inquiry. The Silurian Hypothesis, then, is not the assertion that there was once a high-tech civilization before us, but rather an open question, one that invites exploration without jumping to conclusions. In the case of Frank and Schmidt, they weren't asserting a past civilization, but suggesting that we cannot rule out its existence based on the evidence we have. Their hypothesis wasn't born in a vacuum. It was the product of a deep understanding of Earth's history and of the principles that govern planetary habitability. To truly appreciate why this question is so fascinating, we need to look at the nature of deep time, the vast, stretching intervals of geologic history that span billions of years. The Earth's atmosphere, oceans, and climate are all shaped by slow, unyielding forces. The movement of tectonic plates, the cycle of carbon and oxygen, the pull of the sun. Over millions of years, these processes can erase nearly every trace of what came before. This is where the science of climate change and planetary geophysics meets the enigma of lost civilizations. The idea that technological societies could rise and fall, leaving no trace in the fossil record, isn't just theoretical. It's a reality we must face as we try to understand our own planet's future. Frank and Schmidt's hypothesis asks us to think in long, deep stretches of time, to imagine what our planet's history might look like if the erosion of knowledge, technology, and cities is more common than we realize. Perhaps this is where the true relevance of the Silurian hypothesis shines through. If we are to understand how human civilization might endure or fade, we need to look not just at our present, but at the farthest reaches of Earth's history. Can technological societies survive long enough to leave a legacy? Can their technologies persist through eons, or do they too vanish with the passing of time, leaving only vague clues behind? These are questions that force us to confront our own assumptions about permanence, technology, and time. Looking for a past civilization isn't just a historical exercise. It's a way to understand our own fate. If humanity is truly unique in its technological achievement, then we are an anomaly in the universe. If, however, civilizations rise and fall in predictable patterns, then we must ask, how long can we last? And more importantly, what will remain after we're gone? When Frank and Schmidt posed the Silurian hypothesis, they weren't just engaging in abstract musings. They were framing a civilization test, a challenge to think about the conditions under which intelligent species can thrive. Could a civilization survive long enough to produce lasting evidence, or would its own technology be swallowed by the Earth's constant cycles of change? This test isn't about finding evidence of the past, but understanding the conditions under which any civilization could endure, whether human or otherwise. It's about understanding the limits of time and memory, and how civilizations are woven into the fabric of a planet's geology. This challenge isn't just about geological processes or speculative history. It's about the very nature of what it means to be human. Our story is still unfolding, but by contemplating these vast spans of time and the possibility of other intelligent societies, we glimpse a much larger truth, that we too may be subject to the whims of time, waiting to be remembered or forgotten in the pages of a world that turns without us. Imagine, for a moment, that you could peel back the layers of Earth itself, each stratum a whisper of time. Somewhere deep, beneath the visible markers of human history, lies a potential mystery so vast it could change everything we know about our place in the world. The Silurian hypothesis dares to ask, what if humans weren't the first to build a civilization? What if, millennia before our own rise, Another intelligent species left its mark on Earth only to vanish, erasing nearly all trace of its existence. At first glance, the idea seems almost absurd. Science fiction spun into a thought experiment. Yet, this is precisely what makes the Silurian hypothesis so fascinating. It does not suggest that dinosaurs were constructing pyramids or writing grand tomes. It's not about ancient alien relics or forgotten superstructures. Rather, it's a hypothesis that challenges the very foundations of how we think about civilization, time, and the enduring trace left by advanced technological societies. The term Silurian, in this context, refers to a geologic period that existed more than 400 million years ago. But the word isn't used literally. Rather, it's a metaphorical reference to the idea of ancient civilizations long lost in time, like the mythical Silurians from Doctor Who, a species who once ruled Earth but were eventually forgotten. This imaginative idea becomes a springboard for a scientific question that is anything but fantastical. What exactly does the Silurian hypothesis propose then? In essence, it suggests that a highly advanced civilization may have existed before ours, perhaps even thriving millions of years ago. However, unlike the grand monuments and structures we associate with past human civilizations, such as the pyramids of Egypt or the ruins of ancient Mesopotamia, this earlier civilization might not have left behind visible artifacts. Instead, their presence may be found in the very chemistry of the Earth itself, subtle shifts in the planet's atmosphere, the remnants of industrial pollution, or chemical byproducts that could have accumulated during their technological era. The hypothesis shifts our focus away from the tangible, from the obvious signs we might expect to find in an archaeological dig. It's not about digging up stone tablets or broken tools. Instead, it's about searching for what might seem invisible to our eyes, what could remain hidden beneath the surface, literally and figuratively. This search for fingerprints of lost technologies presents an entirely new approach to understanding both the past and the future. It's a shift from artifacts to traces, from monuments to molecular signatures. The real challenge lies in recognizing these signals and distinguishing them from natural phenomena. Could a civilization's industrial activity, such as pollution, carbon emissions, or synthetic chemicals, leave a detectable mark long after its extinction? This line of thought is not merely a curiosity, it's a paradigm shift. It pushes us to rethink what defines a civilization in the first place. We often look to human markers, agriculture, cities, writing systems, and monumental architecture. But can we define a civilization purely by its technological impacts on the environment? What if the most significant signs of a society's existence are not in the buildings they leave behind, but in the chemical composition of the air, the soil, and the oceans? The Silurian hypothesis challenges our assumptions that civilizations must always leave large, obvious monuments. Instead, it suggests that their legacy could be written into the earth itself, quietly and invisibly. Furthermore, the hypothesis confronts something deeply ingrained in our worldview: anthropocentrism. As humans, we tend to place ourselves at the center of all narratives, believing that our rise to dominance is the natural order of things. The Silurian hypothesis, however, throws a wrench into this assumption. What if Earth's dominance, its capacity for sustaining intelligent life, was never exclusively ours? What if the conditions that enabled us to thrive had been shaped by a previous, unknown civilization? The question, then, isn't simply about finding proof of ancient societies. It's about understanding Earth's geological and atmospheric history in a new light, one that considers the potential role of past civilizations in shaping our planet. This brings us to a paradox at the heart of the hypothesis. The very nature of technological advancement creates a problem. A civilization capable of altering its environment on a global scale may also be capable of erasing all evidence of its existence. It's a sobering thought. What if the signs of past civilizations are deliberately wiped away by their own technological advancements? Imagine a society that, in its pursuit of progress, causes a shift in the planet's geology, making it nearly impossible for future generations, or species, to detect its former presence. The very technology that enables a civilization to flourish might, in turn, erase its tracks. This idea is not just theoretical, it has real-world implications for our understanding of extinction events, climate change, and even the sustainability of our own civilization. In considering the Silurian hypothesis, we are asked to think about the future of humanity. What happens when our own civilization eventually fades away? Will there be any trace of us left behind for future intelligent species to find? Will they look back in wonder, as we do with the fossils of past creatures, asking themselves, what came before? As we explore this line of thinking, it begins to intersect with broader philosophical questions about time, legacy, and the impermanence of civilizations. Are we the final act in a never-ending cycle of rises and falls, or is our own civilization just another chapter in a much larger, deeper history? These questions might not have easy answers, but they are at the core of the Silurian hypothesis, urging us to consider what we know and what we don't about the history of life on Earth. And as we reflect on these profound mysteries, we can't help but wonder, is science fiction perhaps more than just a genre, but a way for us to glimpse into the deepest corners of possibility? Doctor Who was not just a whimsical show about time travel and alien races. It captured the imagination of an entire generation, asking us what happens when we stretch the bounds of history and question the assumptions that underpin our understanding of the past. It invites us to consider that what we think we know about our world may be far less certain than we'd like to believe. So what if, buried beneath our feet, there are remnants of a civilization so advanced, so interconnected with the planet, that it left behind no more than a few chemical signatures? What if the story of life on Earth is far older and far more complex than we can imagine? And now, as we venture deeper into this speculative landscape, we turn our gaze toward the divide between scientific curiosity and the realm of science fiction. What role does imagination play in the scientific process, and how does the boundary between the two blur as we seek answers to the most profound questions of existence? Let's explore this intriguing question next. As our minds wander into the realm of forgotten civilizations, we often find ourselves teetering on the boundary between fiction and reality. It's a curious space, where imagination and scientific inquiry coexist, sometimes colliding, sometimes merging in ways that spark new ideas. In the world of speculative thought, the Silurian hypothesis stands as a stark reminder of the potential for uncharted histories, lost civilizations that might have come before us, only to be erased by time and circumstance. Yet, where does the line between the imaginative and the scientific blur? And can fiction, that boundless landscape of creative possibilities, truly help us probe the unknown depths of Earth's distant past? Take, for instance, the Silurians in Doctor Who, the ancient reptilian civilization that once thrived on Earth before human beings. In the show's lore, these creatures live in vast, underground cities, their legacy hidden beneath layers of soil and rock. It's easy to dismiss such stories as mere fantasy. After all, they spring from the pages of a science fiction television series. But the idea of civilizations existing below the surface isn't as far-fetched as it seems. In fact, it's a thought experiment that pushes us to question what might have been lost beneath the Earth's crust. Could there have been others before us, their cities long since eroded, their achievements swallowed by time and catastrophe? It's precisely these kinds of speculative ideas that plant the seeds for scientific curiosity. Science fiction has long been the breeding ground for such thought experiments, offering us visions of worlds and histories that may never be realized, but which open our minds to the vast, untapped potential of what could have been. The stories of Isaac Asimov, Arthur C. Clarke, and H.P. Lovecraft often delved into the notion of civilizations far older than humanity's, societies that flourished only to fall into the abyss of history, their traces hidden in the stars or buried deep beneath the sands of time. These tales are more than just imaginative stories. They carry within them seeds of philosophical and scientific exploration. Asimov's Foundation series, for instance, famously explores the rise and fall of empires across time, suggesting that advanced civilizations could leave behind only the faintest traces of their existence, just as we might one day be forgotten. In this sense, science fiction doesn't simply entertain us. It serves as a tool to explore our own assumptions about the past and future. It allows us to ask questions we might never have considered otherwise. What would it take for a civilization to leave no trace behind? What if the remnants of past worlds were so subtle that even our most advanced tools couldn't detect them? What if the legacy of an ancient society lay not in physical artifacts, but in chemical signatures or altered atmospheric conditions? The boundary between imagination and science becomes even more intriguing when we consider how such speculative stories have inspired real-world hypotheses. The very notion of the Silurian hypothesis, though rooted in scientific inquiry, owes much of its momentum to the world of fiction. The idea of a forgotten civilization is not a new one, nor is it confined to the realm of Doctor Who. The works of Clarke and Lovecraft similarly entertain the possibility that humanity might not be the first to walk this earth. Lovecraft's Cthulhu mythos, for example, introduces ancient gods and creatures who predate humanity by millennia, leaving only cryptic traces in forgotten ruins and the unconscious minds of the living. These fictional concepts, steeped in the surreal, give us permission to stretch our imaginations to their limits and, in doing so, inspire real-world questions about the potential for lost civilizations. But the question arises, how does a work of fiction cross over into the domain of scientific curiosity? It's easy to dismiss such stories as mere fantasy, but in their absurdity often lies a kernel of truth. Fiction opens doors, daring us to look beyond the constraints of what we know and into what might be possible. In the case of the Silurian hypothesis, it offers a tantalizing scenario to ponder. What if human beings are not the first species to build a civilization on Earth? What if our technological prowess is not unique in the grand tapestry of the planet's history? At its core, the Silurian hypothesis challenges our assumptions about the course of human development. It invites us to imagine a world where, perhaps, we are the second or third civilization to rise, not the first. The idea is humbling, even unsettling. It forces us to confront the fragility of our own existence and to question whether the civilizations that came before us could have reached a level of technological sophistication only to fall into oblivion. After all, we are living in an age where we may be facing our own extinction events, climate change, nuclear war, or other unforeseen calamities. Could humanity one day disappear, leaving behind nothing but the faintest echoes of our existence? Perhaps it has happened before. Fiction allows us to explore these ideas without the constraints of reality, but science helps us ground them in a framework that's testable and observable. If a civilization truly existed before us, what would be the evidence? Would it be something as grand as the pyramids, or would it be something far subtler? Chemical residues left in the soil, anomalies in the planet's carbon or oxygen levels, or even traces of long-gone atmospheres. In this way, fiction and science work in tandem, feeding off each other to expand the limits of our understanding. This intersection of scientific curiosity and fictional exploration creates an intriguing tension. Fiction gives us the room to imagine the impossible, while science grounds us in what is probable or even possible. The two spheres inform each other, creating a dialogue that spans both the fantastical and the grounded. As we delve deeper into the idea of a lost civilization, we begin to see how fiction has already shaped the way we think about the past, pushing us toward new hypotheses and perhaps new ways of searching for the remnants of an ancient world. As we look to the future, The question of whether we can detect the traces of a forgotten civilization, if one even existed, becomes more pressing. Could we ever truly uncover the secrets of the past, buried deep beneath the Earth's surface? Or are we destined to remain ignorant of the civilizations that might have preceded us? The answer, like much of this journey, remains shrouded in mystery. If a forgotten civilization once existed, what could be left behind to remind us of its presence? The paradox we face when searching for evidence of such an ancient society is rooted in the nature of time itself. Time, with its slow yet inexorable passage, is a force that erases much of what we think of as permanent. If advanced beings had walked the Earth long before us, their traces might be hidden beneath layers of sediment and rock, gone unnoticed in the unfolding drama of geological change. A common assumption is that the remnants of a civilization would be easy to find. After all, we leave behind vast quantities of material evidence. Cities, roads, tools, written records. These are the markers of human progress. But when we look at the Earth's deep history, we realize that the situation is far more complicated. If something like our current civilization had once risen and fallen, what exactly might have survived the crushing weight of time? Fossils, for example, are often what we turn to when searching for traces of life from ages long past. But in the case of an industrial society, what could fossilize? The very materials we create, plastics, metals, synthetic compounds, are often so far removed from natural processes that they don't readily decompose in ways that lead to fossilization. Plastics, a hallmark of modern life, are particularly intriguing. We produce billions of tons of plastic each year, much of which could conceivably outlast its creators. In theory, a civilization's plastic waste could be preserved for millennia. But how likely is it that we could find such materials, buried deep in the Earth, amidst layers of geological time? Would they simply decay, or might we one day discover traces of them embedded in the planet's crust? Beyond plastics, radioactive isotopes offer another intriguing clue. Nuclear technology, with its long-lasting radioactive signatures, could be a lasting reminder of a civilization's existence. The half-life of certain isotopes spans tens of thousands to millions of years, meaning that remnants of nuclear waste or atomic tests could leave behind signals detectable even long after the society responsible has disappeared. It's a strange thought. If some ancient civilization had harnessed the power of the atom, we might one day discover subtle traces of that power in the form of radiation. But like all potential clues, the question remains: could we detect such signals beneath the weight of eons? Then there are the fossil fuels: coal, oil, natural gas. These too are the remnants of long-forgotten biological processes, buried and compressed over millions of years. In a sense, the burning of fossil fuels by modern humans is simply tapping into a deep past, a form of energy that was once alive but is now transformed into a substance that powers our world. Could the remains of ancient life have been preserved in a similar way, providing us with a key to unravel the mystery of a prior civilization? Yet, even fossil fuels are susceptible to time's relentless erasure, their traces scattered over vast stretches of land and perhaps lost forever. The challenge of detecting evidence of an ancient civilization becomes even more daunting when we consider the geological forces at play. The Earth is a dynamic, constantly changing planet. Volcanic eruptions, earthquakes, erosion, and the slow but steady movement of tectonic plates all work together to reshape the surface. What's left on the surface today may be gone tomorrow as continents drift, mountains crumble, and oceans swallow entire coastlines. Even the most durable materials may be reduced to dust in the face of these forces. The cycle of erosion is relentless, wearing down once pristine landscapes, scattering evidence far and wide. Any remnants of civilization, buildings, tools, or even the chemicals we create, might simply vanish under the pressure of time. When we think about the possibility of a civilization lost to deep time, we are faced with a profound realization. The window of time available for archaeological discovery may be too narrow. If a civilization existed millions of years ago, the vast majority of its traces might have been erased long before humans arrived on the scene. This brings us to a sobering conclusion. Our search for evidence of such civilizations may be like searching for a needle in an ever-shifting haystack. Yet, in the search for these lost civilizations, we might be looking in the wrong places or focusing on the wrong kinds of evidence. The fossil record, while rich with traces of ancient life, offers little in the way of advanced civilizations. The key, perhaps, is to look not for artifacts of human civilization as we understand it, but rather for unusual signals in the geological record that suggest something more. Could there be strange, unexplained patterns in the layers of rock, odd chemical compositions, or an unusual concentration of certain elements? These geological anomalies could point to something that could not have been caused by natural processes alone. It's also worth considering how we might detect such traces in the future. Advances in technology, particularly in fields like deep-time archaeology, radiometric dating, and geochemistry, may one day provide us with the tools to peer deeper into the Earth's history. Perhaps new techniques will allow us to detect traces of ancient industrial activity that we currently lack the methods to find. With these tools, we might one day uncover a civilization that has long since vanished, leaving behind only a faint whisper in the rocks and soil. But even if we could detect the faintest traces of a civilization that existed millions of years ago, how would we know what we were looking at? Without written records, without cultural context, it would be impossible to understand the significance of what we found. A strange isotope signature or an odd chemical deposit might not mean much to the untrained eye. In fact, it might be dismissed as a natural anomaly. And even if we did recognize it as evidence of an ancient society, would we be able to fully comprehend its implications? The mind of a civilization lost to time may be as unknowable as the stars. Still, the question lingers. Could we ever detect a forgotten civilization? While the odds may seem slim, the possibility remains that in the depths of time, clues may exist, if we know where to look and how to interpret what we find. As we contemplate the intricacies of deep time and the elusive traces of ancient life, it's essential to remember that time itself is a vast and unfathomable concept. Just as we struggle to grasp the true scale of the universe, we also face the challenge of understanding the vastness of time. And this leads us to a deeper reflection. How can we even begin to make sense of time spans that stretch into the hundreds of millions of years? If you take a moment to think about Earth's history, it's easy to feel like you're standing at the edge of an unfathomable abyss. Our entire human existence, with all its achievements, joys, and conflicts, unfolds as an infinitesimal flicker on the grand timeline of the planet itself. The stretches of time that have shaped Earth and possibly other civilizations are almost too vast to fully grasp. How do we, mere specks of life, even begin to understand the immense swathes of time that have preceded us? Imagine for a moment that Earth's history is condensed into a single calendar year. The first day, January 1st, marks the formation of our planet, a swirling, fiery ball of gas and dust. Life first stirs in the oceans on March 21st, a seemingly slow, unremarkable event. For nearly the next 4 months, Earth is home to only microscopic organisms, each one no more complex than a simple cell. It's not until late in November that complex life forms, those with organs, shells, and skeletons, begin to make their mark. Yet, despite these ancient milestones, it's only in the final few minutes of December 31st that mammals, and eventually humans, emerge. And in the final few seconds of the year, we arrive. This sense of deep time, stretching far beyond what our minds are accustomed to, creates a profound contrast between the transient nature of human life and the planet's long, unfolding saga. The sheer span of Earth's history can make us feel like we're mere whispers, and that history is an ocean we can never hope to navigate. When we speak of deep time, we are referring to a timescale that stretches beyond what we can fully comprehend. It's a mind-bending concept, but one that offers a glimpse into the incredibly slow processes that shape the world as we know it. The term itself refers to the 4.5 billion years since Earth's formation, a number so staggering that even a century, let alone a single human lifetime, seems utterly insignificant. To make sense of this, paleontologists and geologists have divided time into eons, eras, periods, and epochs, each with its own distinct character. But these divisions, while useful, often feel arbitrary, as though we're trying to divide an ocean into neat, manageable sections. Let's pause for a moment to appreciate just how much of Earth's past is hidden from us. The fossil record, our main window into ancient life, is a fragile and incomplete guide. Fossils themselves are often rare, preserved only under certain conditions. For every fossil we find, countless others have vanished into the depths of time. Entire ecosystems, once thriving with diverse life, have been erased, their traces lost to the elements. It's as if an entire chapter in Earth's book has been torn out. That's not to mention the vast stretches of time that leave no trace at all, periods of Earth's history so ancient and deep that the rocks themselves have been crushed, melted, or transformed beyond recognition. We could be standing on the site of an ancient civilization, and yet the evidence of its existence could be gone forever, lost to the relentless march of geological change. Perhaps the most humbling aspect of deep time is the realization that even the most monumental events can slip quietly into oblivion. Natural forces, such as plate tectonics, erosion, and volcanic activity, are ceaseless in their work, erasing any marks left on the surface. The Earth has experienced countless extinctions, changes in climate, and geological upheavals that have reshaped entire continents, erasing much of what came before. An entire civilization might have risen and fallen long before humanity, and yet we may never know it. But time itself is not an absolute, unchanging force. It can bend, stretch, and shift. Imagine a timeline with a great chasm in the middle, a gap where no records exist, where no fossils remain. These gaps, these missing stretches of time, are some of the most intriguing mysteries in Earth's history. If a civilization existed millions of years ago, how could we even begin to search for its traces? This brings us to the paradox of what we can know and what remains forever beyond our reach. While scientists can measure and observe the geological processes that shape the Earth's surface, there's only so much we can infer from what we see today. The remnants of the distant past, the evidence that may point to a forgotten civilization, could be so deeply embedded in the Earth that we would never be able to recognize it. The delicate dance of geological forces means that what's visible today may be an entirely different version of Earth than what existed millennia ago. But despite these challenges, we continue to probe the depths of our planet's history, trying to piece together the fragments left behind. We search for fossilized bones, ancient tool marks, or traces of ancient metals that could give us a glimpse into a world that no longer exists. What would we even look for if there were a forgotten civilization that existed long before us? Would we see evidence in the layers of rock buried deep beneath our feet? Could the remnants of their technology, perhaps even something as seemingly permanent as plastics, have survived? Even now, we are just beginning to uncover the ancient footprints of life. Consider, for instance, the discovery of ancient microfossils, tiny remnants of life from millions of years ago that could tell us more than we ever imagined about the creatures that once roamed the Earth, or the study of isotopes in rocks, which might reveal changes in the Earth's atmosphere or the presence of unusual chemicals. We may not know what we're looking for, but we know that the past is still out there, hiding in plain sight. In this search, time itself becomes a fluid, unknowable force. We struggle to make sense of it, to find our place in its vast expanse. And yet, the more we learn, the more we realize how little we truly know. What if the traces of an ancient civilization lie just beneath our feet, waiting to be uncovered? How would we even begin to recognize the signals of life from millions of years ago, when the Earth was a very different place? As we look forward to the next chapter of our journey, we will find ourselves drawn into the mysteries of Earth's great forgetting. How does the planet remember its past, and what does it choose to forget? Could a lost civilization truly vanish into the abyss of time, or does it leave an indelible mark on the world that we are yet to understand? Imagine the Earth as an enormous canvas, one constantly being painted over by forces far beyond our control. With every shift in the planet's surface, something old is erased, making way for something new. Mountains rise only to be weathered into dust, oceans swallow entire continents, and vast forests are replaced by deserts. If a civilization were to rise and fall on this canvas, how much of it would remain, if anything at all? Our world's dynamic nature means that evidence of ancient civilizations could be swallowed by the very forces that shape the planet's surface. Take, for example, the movement of tectonic plates. Beneath our feet, the Earth is constantly shifting, with enormous chunks of land slowly drifting across the surface. As plates collide and pull apart, they generate both destruction and creation. Mountains are thrust upward, valleys are carved into the Earth's crust, and, over millennia, entire landmasses are reshaped. The process of subduction, where one tectonic plate is forced beneath another, acts like nature's great delete button. It erases everything in its path, from ancient coastlines to the remains of long-forgotten civilizations. Consider the ancient supercontinent of Pangaea, which existed around 300 million years ago. Over time, Pangaea split apart, forming the continents we know today. Yet the evidence of any civilizations that may have existed on that ancient landmass has long since been destroyed by the relentless grinding of tectonic forces. The idea that we could find the remnants of a civilization from millions of years ago is a bit like searching for a needle in an ever-changing haystack. In some ways, the planet itself acts as a great archivist, constantly overwriting its own history with each cycle of geological activity. This relentless reshaping of the Earth is why, beyond a few million years, very little survives from past civilizations, or even past species. Fossils, for example, are rare glimpses into ancient life, but even they are far from permanent. The conditions required for fossilization are specific: the right temperature, pressure, and environment. When these conditions aren't met, organic material decays, leaving behind no trace. Fossils, like the fossils of ancient animals, can give us a snapshot of life, but they are fleeting. Time moves too quickly for even the most durable of our creations to survive. There's also the question of where evidence could even hide. If a civilization were to rise and fall in an era before the rise of human life, where would the signs of it be? In the depths of the ocean, perhaps, or buried deep within the Earth's mantle? We already know that the ocean floor itself is a vast, constantly changing landscape. Entire ecosystems are built and destroyed on a scale we can barely comprehend. Could the remnants of an ancient civilization lie beneath the ocean floor, buried under layers of sediment, waiting to be discovered by a future that may never come? What we often overlook is the fact that the Earth operates on what we might call geological time, a time frame so vast that human history barely registers within it. To put this into perspective, imagine the entire history of Earth compressed into a single year. In this model, the planet's formation, its birth from a cloud of gas and dust, occurs at the very beginning of January. The first signs of life emerge in early March, but it isn't until mid-September that multicellular life begins to form. Dinosaurs, which once ruled the Earth, come into existence on December 13th, only to go extinct on December 26th, just 5 days before the calendar year ends. Humans, meanwhile, don't appear until the last few seconds of December 31st. This perspective shows us just how fleeting our presence on this planet really is. Civilizations, ours included, have barely existed for the briefest of moments in comparison to the long, unbroken history of Earth. If we were to imagine a lost civilization existing within that vast span of deep time, we must contend with the enormity of the geological forces that could erase it. It's almost as though Earth itself is a great recycler, constantly reinventing itself, reworking the layers of its skin, and leaving behind only the faintest hints of what came before. The question arises, what might be left of us if we were not the first civilization? Could the traces of a previous world be buried deep beneath the layers of time, waiting for someone or something to uncover them? Perhaps the most humbling thought of all is that the Earth may not only be erasing the remnants of past civilizations, but is also blind to its own history. It is as if the Earth has forgotten what came before, constantly pressing the reset button on the past. For every ancient civilization that might have once thrived, a vast ocean of time has passed, and with it, the evidence has been swept away. What stories were lost in this process? What technologies? What wisdom? What artistry? We can never know. As we think about the possibility of a lost civilization, we must also face the fact that Earth's geological processes are not linear. There are gaps, vast stretches of time where the evidence of the past simply vanishes. Entire continents are erased, buried under the weight of mountains, washed away by oceans, or hidden in the dark recesses of the Earth's crust. These time gaps make it even more difficult to piece together the puzzle of the past. There are entire periods of time that we will never truly understand, for no evidence remains to guide us. The more we consider these vast, incomprehensible processes, the more we are drawn into a kind of cosmic humility. The Earth, in its infinite wisdom and indifference, moves on regardless of the civilizations that rise and fall upon it. And yet, beneath the surface, we are left to wonder, could there have been a time when something else, someone else, walked the Earth before us? Was there a previous civilization, perhaps even more advanced than our own, whose legacy has been lost to the sands of time? As we explore this idea, we are led to consider the great resets that Earth has experienced through mass extinctions, which have, time and again, wiped the slate clean. What, then, can we make of these reset buttons in Earth's long history? What if the Earth itself had wiped out an advanced civilization before ours, leaving nothing behind? As we look back through the lens of deep time, there are certain punctuations in Earth's history, violent, catastrophic events that seem to wipe the slate clean. These moments, though devastating, set the stage for new beginnings, reshaping the course of life on the planet. The rhythm of Earth's evolution is marked by these chaotic resets, sweeping away ecosystems, species, and even entire dominions of life. When a massive extinction occurs, it's not just an event, it's a turning point in the planet's story. And as these resets happen, life is forced to reinvent itself, to rebuild, and to emerge anew. Think of these extinction events as nature's way of pushing the reset button on the grand experiment of life. The most famous of these events, the Big Five, are so catastrophic that their echoes still reverberate through the Earth's geology. From the Permian-Triassic extinction, where almost 96% of life perished, to the Cretaceous-Paleogene event that ended the age of the dinosaurs, these mass die-offs have shaped the course of biological evolution. But what about civilization? Could a highly advanced society, much like ours, fall victim to one of these resets? Or, perhaps more provocatively, could a civilization have already existed, only to be obliterated, its remains lost forever in the deep folds of time? The Big Five extinction events mark the extremes of planetary upheaval. Each one represents a profound disruption in the ecological balance of the Earth. These events didn't simply erase individual species, they reset the trajectory of life itself. After these cataclysmic episodes, the survivors were left to reimagine the world. It was a period of recovery, a biological upheaval where new niches were filled and life adapted to the radically altered environments. The Permian-Triassic event, the largest of these, offers an eerie parallel to the idea of a collapsed civilization. If entire ecosystems and dominant species can be wiped from the Earth, how might the fragile thread of human civilization hold up against such forces? In the aftermath of these extinctions, Earth's ecosystems didn't immediately spring back into action. It took millions of years for life to truly recover, reshaping the biosphere in ways we can only partially understand. The dinosaurs, for example, didn't immediately rise to dominance after the Permian-Triassic extinction. There was a gap, a long period of adaptation, where new life forms found their footing. This process wasn't a smooth, linear recovery. It was a chaotic, unpredictable event, similar to how society might react to a mass extinction of human civilization. Could we imagine a scenario where an advanced civilization, much like our own, exists at the precipice of such an event, only to fall into the abyss, leaving behind faint traces of its existence never to be recognized? Consider the Permian-Triassic extinction, a time when Earth's atmosphere was suffocated by toxins, oceans acidified, and the planet's climate turned hostile. The scale of destruction was so vast that the life that survived was profoundly altered. The ecosystems that emerged afterward were radically different, filled with survivors that were adapted to a world so altered it might seem unrecognizable. If a civilization were to collapse in the wake of such an extinction, it would be unlikely to leave behind much for future civilizations to uncover. What if the signs of this past civilization were hidden beneath layers of rock and deep in the geologic record, their cities long buried under miles of shifting earth? Could we ever know if we weren't the first to thrive here? In many ways, the idea of a vanished civilization mirrors the post-extinction world. After each of these mass die-offs, life had to start over from the debris, building new life forms that were equipped to handle the altered planet. If human civilization were to perish in such an event, what remnants of our technological, cultural, or societal advances would be left behind? Would they be wiped out by the relentless forces of nature, or would they endure, waiting to be uncovered by a future that may or may not come? The more we uncover about the history of Earth's great extinctions, the more we begin to understand that the past is a delicate thing, often erased before we have the chance to study it fully. Perhaps the most unsettling question we can ask ourselves is this: could the next great extinction event already be on the horizon? And if so, what might we leave behind? In the face of such a cosmic reset, how would our civilization, so deeply entrenched in the moment, respond to the vast, impersonal forces of nature? If we look at the Big Five extinctions, one thing is clear: life doesn't care about the past. The planet moves on, as it always has. The idea that a civilization could vanish, just as species have before it, forces us to reckon with the fragility of our existence. After all, what civilization can ever be certain that it won't be the next to fall, its evidence hidden beneath oceans, mountains, or the crushing pressure of time itself? From this, we are left with an uncomfortable yet fascinating notion. In the geological blink of an eye, our civilization could join the ranks of the forgotten, swallowed by the very forces that have shaped life itself. But just as the Earth has witnessed the rise and fall of life before, it will continue, relentlessly moving forward, perhaps leaving behind only the faintest whispers of what came before. As we consider this, a deeper question emerges. If our civilization were to vanish, how would future explorers of the Earth, a distant species perhaps not unlike us, know we ever existed? Would they too wonder what happened to the first great civilizations of the Earth? What traces would we leave for them to discover? The thought lingers. If we are to face such a future, could we leave behind a legacy that might survive long after us? A story written in the stars, perhaps, or encoded in the very bones of the Earth? And more importantly, Would that future civilization be able to decipher it? Or would they be left to wonder, just as we do now, about the lost ages that came before? And with that, we transition into a new layer of our story. As we contemplate the forces that could erase us, we begin to ask another question. Is our own history already slipping away, unnoticed under the relentless passage of time? What remnants of our world, the buildings and technologies we've created, might be vanishing right now without us even realizing it? What happens when time, that ever-present force, erases the very records we've left behind? The passage of time is a quiet thief. It erases, it buries, it blurs. If we were to look back just 10,000 years, a blink of an eye in geological terms would reveal a world remarkably different from the one we know now. And yet, in the grand span of Earth's history, it's as though that time and the cultures that defined it were little more than echoes. What is left from those 10,000 years to show that we were here? What traces of the civilizations that once walked the Earth will survive? Consider the landscape of New York City, teeming with life, skyscrapers rising to the heavens, roads lined with the hum of daily activity. Yet, over time, much would vanish, erased by weathering and shifting Earth. And in that eventuality, how much would future geologists discover? Would they be able to tell that human civilization once ruled this planet? Or would it appear as though we never existed at all? There is a profound paradox in this question. The absence of evidence is not the evidence of absence. We often believe that if we cannot find something, it must not be there. But in the context of deep time, this logic falls apart. Just because we don't have the artifacts, the writings, the bones, does not mean there was nothing. Think of it like a treasure chest buried beneath layers of sand, lost to the shifting tides of the ocean. It may never surface again, but its contents are still there, patiently waiting for the right conditions to reveal them. This is the challenge faced by future geologists. They might look back at the ruins of cities and wonder, how could something so advanced have simply disappeared? Without the traces of technology, the digital archives, or even the very bones of our species, they might misinterpret what happened to us. Imagine the challenge. Future scientists might stand on the same streets where we live today, looking for the faintest evidence that humanity once roamed the Earth. If all that remained was a thin layer of sediment mixed with artifacts that were too small, too fragile to survive the passage of time, how would they reconstruct our world? They could stumble upon a single tablet, carved with symbols, or perhaps the remnants of a collapsed building. But without a living civilization to interpret it, the meaning might be lost. How much of our story would slip through their fingers like grains of sand, slipping away before they even realize it was there? And then there's the paradoxical nature of technological legacies. Our devices, made of plastics and metals, could be so durable in the short term, but will they hold up over millennia? Our buildings, made of steel and glass, are strong in their time, but eventually, erosion, earthquakes, and the slow creep of entropy will take their toll. How will they decipher what was once an advanced civilization, one that communicated across the globe, that explored the stars, that reshaped the world with its power? Even the deep oceans could be hiding remnants of our civilization. Buried beneath layers of oceanic sediment, entire cities could be hidden in plain sight. After all, our modern technologies and materials have already begun to sink into the depths, perhaps to remain there for eons. The idea that our civilization might eventually be discovered like a sunken ship sitting at the bottom of the ocean is a hauntingly plausible image. And yet, in the vast expanse of Earth's timeline, a few centuries, perhaps even a few millennia, are but a passing moment. So, while we may wonder if our history is destined to vanish, we must also ponder, how long could our imprint really last? What could we possibly leave behind to show we were here? Yet, this line of thinking also brings us back to the idea that disappearance doesn't mean we were never here. Our legacy might not look the way we expect it to. Instead of giant monuments or towering structures, it might appear as subtle shifts in the atmosphere, in the way the climate has changed, or even in the genetic makeup of organisms. A genetic trace, an alteration in a species' evolutionary path, could whisper our existence long after the physical evidence of our civilization is gone. Perhaps it will be something so minuscule, so embedded in the natural world, that it will be a quiet reminder to those who study it. We were here. This raises a larger, almost philosophical question. Is it possible that human history, with all its achievements, could vanish in a geological instant, leaving behind only the faintest of traces? Could we be one of those civilizations, like the ones before us, that simply faded away, leaving only dust scattered through time? It's a humbling thought, one that challenges our very notion of permanence. As we consider this possibility, we find ourselves pondering the conditions that allowed intelligence and civilization to arise in the first place. What were the factors that led to the rise of complex thought, language, and technological development? And more curiously, how many other civilizations might have existed in the past, perhaps even before us, only to be wiped out before they had the chance to leave their mark on the world? This question leads us naturally into our next exploration. What are the conditions necessary for intelligence to arise in the first place? Could it be that intelligence is not a singular, inevitable trait, but rather a rare, fragile blossom in the long history of Earth, a product of specific conditions that may not be as common as we think? And if so, does that mean the rise of intelligence is a fleeting gift, one that might vanish with the next catastrophe, as all things eventually do? We'll consider these questions as we continue to explore the fascinating possibility of ancient, forgotten civilizations. It's easy to think of intelligence as an inevitable crown atop the evolutionary ladder, as though, given enough time, the march of biology will always lead to minds that wonder, build, and remember. But evolution doesn't play toward destiny, it plays toward survival. And survival, across billions of years, has rarely required the kind of intelligence we prize in ourselves. Let's start with the basics. To even begin developing intelligence, a species needs more than just a clever brain. It needs the right environment, a long stretch of climate stability for one. Intelligence, particularly the kind that allows for abstract thought and complex technology, doesn't thrive in chaos. A planet plagued by endless volcanic winters or abrupt climate swings doesn't offer the luxury of slow, thoughtful adaptation. In such a world, survival often favors speed, hardiness, or brute instinct over strategy and foresight. Earth has had its share of such turbulence. Ice ages, asteroid impacts, and global anoxic events have swept away entire ecosystems in the blink of geological time. But in between those cataclysms, there have been windows, long, warm, stable epochs where life could do more than just react. These were the cradles of complexity and possibly of minds. But climate is only the canvas. What about the tools to paint with? Access to fire, for instance, was pivotal for humans. Fire didn't just keep us warm, it transformed what we ate, protected us from predators, extended our social hours into the night, and quite possibly reshaped our very cognition. Then there's cooperation. Intelligence may begin in the brain, but it often blooms in groups. Dolphins, elephants, corvids, many show remarkable problem-solving abilities, but their intelligence is deeply social. Shared tasks, learned behaviors, emotional signaling, these are the invisible threads that bind a species towards something greater than the sum of its instincts. We build libraries of knowledge that stretch far beyond what a single lifespan could ever uncover. Without this bridge, intelligence remains locked in the skull, flickering and fragile. Yet for all of these pieces, climate stability, fire, social bonds, communication, to come together at the same time, that may be the true miracle. Natural selection doesn't have a blueprint for civilization. It doesn't seek it out. Evolution works by solving local problems in local ways. On Earth, millions of species adapted perfectly to their niches without ever needing a reflective consciousness. Crocodiles, sharks, ferns, some have barely changed in hundreds of millions of years. Not because they're stagnant, but because they're effective. And that leads us to a haunting possibility. Maybe intelligence as we know it isn't the goal of evolution, but an accident of it. Think of the evolutionary tree like a massive branching river, each fork a new adaptation. Most branches wind off into perfectly serviceable forms of life, strong jaws, quick reflexes, reproductive efficiency. But one tiny twig, one barely noticeable bend, led to symbolic reasoning. Language, art, stories, cities. How many other branches nearly went there, but didn't? How many species had the potential, but not the push? Predators can push prey into better camouflage, faster legs. But what pushes a species into building tools, or shaping stone, or thinking beyond the next meal? Some argue that once you start down the path of tool use, intelligence becomes a runaway feedback loop. You make tools, which make survival easier, which frees time, which allows for better tools. Others counter, not all tool users evolve culture, not all culture leads to cities, and not all cities leave anything behind. The fossil record, for all its wonder, is full of blanks. Soft tissue rarely fossilizes. Wooden structures vanish. Oral traditions, entire mythologies and cosmologies, evaporate without a written trace. A civilization made of biodegradable materials could rise, flourish, and fall, all without leaving more than a chemical fingerprint buried under layers of sediment. Even our own era, for all its concrete and steel, may be reduced one day to a whisper of strange isotopes and a faint carbon spike. So, if intelligence isn't guaranteed, if it's not the end goal of nature, but a rare and curious offshoot, could it have happened before? That's the question that brings us to the edge of something even more speculative, yet oddly grounded. If another intelligent species once emerged long before us, under different conditions, where would we even begin to look? What creatures might they have been? What epoch might have nurtured them? Were they like us, or entirely alien in their cognition, their values, their creations? Imagine walking through a dense, ancient forest. Only it's not filled with trees, but with possibilities. Possibilities of minds that once thought, communicated, remembered, perhaps even dreamed, yet left behind nothing that could speak for them. No monuments, no satellites, not even a scratch on a fossilized bone to say, "I was here." As we peel back the layers of Earth's long, restless history, a question quietly lingers. Were we truly the first to wonder? If intelligence doesn't always look like ours, how would we even know it existed? Let's consider the strange case of the dinosaurs. For 160 million years, they dominated the planet, an astonishing reign compared to our own brief moment in time. Most were ruled by instinct, not insight, we believe. But not all. Some, like the troodontids, had large brains relative to body size, forward-facing eyes, and grasping hands. Had the asteroid missed, could their evolutionary path have twisted toward complexity, toward technology? It's tempting to imagine a dino sapien, a creature with scaly fingers designing tools, crafting shelters, maybe even contemplating the stars. Science fiction? Perhaps. But it's not a question of imagination. It's a question of opportunity. Intelligence, after all, needs more than neurons. It needs time, pressure, and the right conditions to bloom. And the age of dinosaurs offered all three. Yet if such a species ever emerged, where are its echoes? Would their bones and tools have survived 60 million years of geological churn? Even if dinosaurs had begun to tread the path of reason, they may have stalled for lack of one vital leap: collaboration. Human cognition is deeply social. Our intelligence was sculpted not in solitude, but in tribes, in stories, in teaching and mimicry. So the real question is, who else has ever combined a capable mind with the capacity to build something greater than themselves? For that, we must turn our gaze toward the oceans. There, in alien realms of liquid darkness, live the octopuses. Not the most obvious contenders for a past civilization. Soft-bodied, short-lived, with no cities or language as we understand it. But what they do have is a kind of fluid genius, problem-solving, memory, mischief, even a sense of play. In labs, they unscrew jars, mimic other species, and escape from enclosures in ways that seem deliberate. What makes octopus intelligence fascinating is not just what they do, but how differently they do it. Their brains are distributed. 2/3 of their neurons are in their arms. It's as if each tentacle has a mind of its own. They are, in a way, living decentralization. But here lies the tragedy of their genius. Octopuses live alone, and they die young. With lifespans often just a year or two, there's no passing down of wisdom, no elder counsel, no culture to accumulate. If a civilization needs continuity, they were brilliant sparks in the dark, never a steady flame. Yet not all non-human intelligence fades so quickly. Take birds. Some species, like crows and parrots, rival primates in problem-solving and tool use. They remember human faces, hold grudges, and even teach their young how to fish with twigs. Was it biology that held them back, or was it something else? Something like fingers or fire? These examples remind us that intelligence is not a ladder with humans at the top. It is a vast landscape full of divergent paths. Each species navigates it differently. Some build, others feel, some remember, others plan. But only one, so far as we know, has built a machine. Still, we mustn't forget the deep past, the murky eons before even the dinosaurs took their first steps. During the Permian and Triassic periods, before mammals had their day, it was the reptiles who ruled. Not the slow, cold-blooded drifters we think of today, but fierce, adaptive, diverse creatures. Some, like the archosaurs, gave rise to both dinosaurs and birds. Others, like therapsids, were mammal-like reptiles with differentiated teeth and possibly warm blood. Is it possible that one of these early lines flirted with cognition? That in the lush swamps or arid highlands of the Permian Earth, an ancient species formed primitive societies, developed a proto-language, or made simple tools of stone and bone? Their world was volatile. Climate shifts, mass extinctions, and tectonic chaos might have buried any evidence under layers of lava or sediment. Fossils from that era are scarce and often fragmented. A civilization that burned briefly, tens or hundreds of millions of years ago, could have left behind nothing we'd recognize. Of course, this is not to claim certainty, it is to admit humility. We are used to thinking of ourselves as the culmination, but what if we are simply one branch in a gnarled and ancient tree? What if evolution produced many kinds of minds before ours, and most of them left no trace? And so, as we consider the possibilities, we begin to see intelligence not as a miracle unique to us, but as a phenomenon that may rise and fall like tides, given time, luck, and the right balance of pressure and peace. Civilization, in this view, becomes less of a pinnacle and more of a pattern. A rare one, yes, but perhaps not a singular one. Which brings us to the most curious minds of all, minds so different from ours, and yet so eerily familiar. Minds that drift in the ocean, change color as they think, and solve puzzles without speaking a word. In the next chapter of our journey, we dive deeper, both literally and metaphorically, into the strange, silent world of cephalopods and the mysteries of the deep mind. In the ink-black depths of the ocean, where sunlight fades into myth and pressure, crushes all but the most resilient forms of life, something remarkable is watching, thinking. There, suspended in the alien stillness of the abyss, lives a mind unlike any other on Earth. Not warm-blooded, not social in the way we understand it, not bound by bones or even a centralized brain. And yet, it solves puzzles, slips through mazes, and alters its world in subtle, deliberate ways. Cephalopods, octopuses, squids, and cuttlefish are perhaps the most tantalizing reminder that intelligence doesn't need to look like us. If they weren't real, we might have invented them in science fiction. Creatures with shape-shifting bodies, distributed brains, and the ability to learn, mimic, and improvise. And yet, in that brief flicker of time, they demonstrate behaviors that seem startlingly advanced: problem-solving, planning, play, even tool use. Some have been seen carrying coconut shells to use as shelters, like nomads dragging tents across the sea floor. The strangeness of their intelligence, its eerie independence, raises a haunting question. What might they become if only they lived longer? If their minds had time to build upon themselves, generation by generation? Could they too have reached for something more than instinct and adaptation, something like civilization? We often imagine civilization as a landscape of stone and fire, buildings, writing, smoke rising from cities. But what if intelligence evolved where fire could not be kindled, where metal could not be smelted, where permanence was dissolved by water itself? The ocean is a world without embers or paper. Even the wheel, a cornerstone of human development, has little use in the open sea. And yet, isn't it human arrogance to assume that intelligence must build the way we do? Cephalopods may not stack stones, but they architect their camouflage with pixel-perfect control of skin pigment. They may not forge tools in a workshop, but they repurpose their environment with deliberate care. If an intelligent species had risen beneath the waves, perhaps millions of years before us, what would they have left behind? Would there be ruins in the ocean? Or would everything, tools, shelters, symbols, have vanished into the soft sediment, broken down by salt and time? Here we bump into a peculiar silence. The ocean is both a cradle and a grave for memory. It preserves some things for eons, like the teeth of ancient sharks, but it erases others almost immediately. Unlike dry land, where artifacts can fossilize, or where fire can bake clay into permanence, the deep sea is an unforgiving archivist. If a civilization had flickered there, built from organic tools or coral dwellings, would we even know? It's not just a question of erosion or biology. It's a question of detectability. What are the signs of a civilization that never smelted ore, never carved stone, never sent smoke signals into the sky? What if their intelligence remained entirely internal, abstract, and ephemeral, lived through behavior, ritual, or some form of bioluminescent expression passed from one short-lived generation to the next? Science fiction has long flirted with this idea. In some stories, ancient aquatic civilizations develop vast minds, not through cities, but through collective memory encoded in DNA or subtle behavioral mimicry. In others, they never reach beyond themselves, content in a quiet, mysterious equilibrium with the ocean. Both are equally haunting. Both whisper to us from the edge of plausibility. And then there's another question, one that turns the mirror inward. If octopuses are so intelligent, why didn't they reach further? What held them back? Was it biology, the environment, or was it the lack of time? An evolutionary experiment cut short. It's possible that cephalopods were simply victims of the Earth's chaotic rhythms. Their numbers have waxed and waned over geological time, sometimes flourishing, other times nearly disappearing. In the Cretaceous period, enormous cephalopods shared the seas with marine reptiles. Could one branch have begun down a different path, one that never got the chance to finish? In a way, their story reminds us that intelligence alone may not be enough. Without the right conditions, longevity, community, continuity, even brilliant minds might never break free of their biological limits. The flickering light of a deep mind might never become a flame. And yet, the idea lingers. If evolution ran again, perhaps with fewer asteroid impacts and more evolutionary runway, who's to say an oceanic mind wouldn't rise? Not to build monuments, but to communicate, organize, create in ways we can't imagine. Perhaps a civilization not of bricks and bronze, but of biosignals and collaborative memory, passed along like songs in the current. If such a culture had once existed, it would challenge our every assumption, not only about what counts as civilization, but what counts as progress. Perhaps they did not fail. Perhaps they simply followed a different rhythm, one we were never meant to hear. But before we drift too deep into the sea's secrets, another current pulls us upward, to the land, where time has given rise not only to biology, but to something more elusive, culture. Because intelligence, on its own, may flicker and fade. But when thought learns to leap from one generation to the next, through teaching, tradition, and story, it begins to build something that no single lifespan could contain. So, how does culture begin to shape evolution itself? How do ideas, not just genes, start driving the destiny of a species? Let's take a step onto that shoreline. Across the shifting currents of Earth's history, intelligence alone has never guaranteed permanence. A clever creature, like the octopus or the raven, may solve puzzles, plan ahead, even display glimmers of creativity. But something more elusive is needed to transform scattered sparks of thought into the fire of civilization. Intelligence is the seed. Culture is the soil in which it must take root to grow. Throughout the animal kingdom, there are dazzling minds in fur, feather, and flesh. Consider this. One chimpanzee may learn to use a stick to fish for termites, but if that knowledge isn't passed on, refined, or combined with other innovations, it withers. Intelligence without continuity is like writing on water. It ripples, then vanishes. Culture is a kind of memory stretched across generations. It lets ideas stack, brick by brick, across time. A human child born today doesn't invent the wheel anew. They inherit thousands of years of accumulated knowledge, language, myths, tools, beliefs. Culture binds individuals into something larger, a collective mind that survives beyond a single lifespan. But how rare is that leap? Could evolution have birthed other intelligent creatures, brilliant, curious, but without the scaffolding of shared learning? Could there have been minds in the deep past that flickered brightly, but briefly, leaving no echo? This tension between raw intelligence and sustained cultural momentum is one of evolution's great gambles. Even in early human history, this dynamic was fragile. Homo sapiens existed for tens of thousands of years before agriculture, writing, or cities emerged. For most of our existence, we were simply one clever ape among many, shaped by survival more than ambition. What flipped the switch? Why, after so long, did the gears of culture begin to grind forward with increasing speed? Some anthropologists point to the evolution of symbolic thought, the ability to represent ideas not just with gestures, but with meaning that transcends the immediate moment. Culture became self-sustaining. Still, intelligence doesn't guarantee this outcome. Imagine a species with sharp reasoning and creativity, but no stable family groups, no communal upbringing, no extended time for young to learn from elders. Evolution may have spun such dice many times, and each time the roll came up short. Cultural evolution is strange in that it's not strictly tied to biology. It builds atop it, yes, but it can leap beyond physical limitations. An elephant cannot fly, but if it had a culture that passed down the blueprints of flight, materials, methods, metaphors, it might build machines that could. Biological evolution is slow, working across eons, carving adaptations, like rivers shaping canyons. Cultural evolution, by contrast, is fast and exponential. It races forward, folding time upon itself. But that speed comes at a cost. Unlike genes, which are locked into the body, culture is fragile. It relies on memory, trust, continuity. Civilizations have risen and fallen based not on physical traits, but on ideas lost, languages forgotten, stories erased, techniques abandoned. A book burned, A teacher silenced, a ritual discontinued. Cultural progress can unravel far more quickly than DNA can mutate. So, could there have been civilizations before us that simply didn't endure? Not for lack of intellect, but for a failure in cultural continuity. Perhaps a species of sentient beings emerged in the shadows of a prehistoric world, sophisticated in thought, but isolated, scattered, lacking the communal glue that lets ideas multiply. Like radio signals beamed into space but never answered, their voices may have echoed briefly, unheard, until the silence returned. It's tempting to assume that civilization is an inevitable product of intelligence. But the fossil record whispers otherwise. For hundreds of millions of years, life on Earth has flourished in complexity and variety, often with startling mental capacities. Yet only once, so far as we know, has that intelligence compounded into skyscrapers, satellites, and symphonies. The missing ingredient wasn't brains, it was continuity. Perhaps what we call civilization is less a natural consequence of smartness and more a fragile, accidental flame, kindled by the right blend of social structures, symbolic tools, and lucky timing. Had just one of those elements been absent in our own past, we too might have wandered the forests indefinitely, clever but unremembered. Which raises a quiet but haunting question. Are there remnants of ancient intelligence scattered in Earth's deep past, creatures whose minds burned brightly, whose thoughts were sharp and strange, but who never built cities, never crafted stone tools, never left artifacts in the sediment for us to find? It's a reminder that intelligence alone does not write history. Memory does. And memory, true, living memory, requires more than neurons. It requires culture. But what if memory could persist even without visible technology? What if consciousness, perception, self-awareness, all the hallmarks of intelligence, could exist and evolve in ways that left no architectural trace? Could we be overlooking ancient minds not because they failed, but because they didn't need to build anything at all? Let's explore what it means to be intelligent without ever touching a tool. There's a quiet assumption that intelligence must always climb a ladder, tool by tool, fire to forge, wheel to warp drive. But what if that's not the only path? What if the most intelligent beings in Earth's deep history looked up at the stars, solved complex puzzles, understood death, and simply never built a single machine? Before our ancestors shaped steel or sowed fields, they lived for tens of thousands of years as nomads. They carved symbols into stone. They mourned the dead, told stories, perhaps even dreamed of gods. And yet, for all their inner complexity, their footprint on the planet was light. So light, in fact, that if we hadn't been here to find their bones and flint tools, much of it would have vanished entirely. Intelligence alone, it seems, is not enough to make a civilization recognizable in the geological record. Track animals with skill, share oral traditions rich in meaning. They are no less human, no less intelligent, but they've chosen, or simply never needed, to step onto the path of industrial civilization. Could the same be true of another species, millions of years ago, evolving in a world without the pressures that drove Homo sapiens toward agriculture and cities? A species in harmony with its environment, perhaps oceanic or forest-dwelling, with no need for surplus, no drive to dominate landscapes. Why build when nature already provides? It's easy to view civilization as the natural result of intelligence, as though stone cities and silicon chips are the fruit of some evolutionary tree. But in reality, civilization is less a destination and more a detour, an adaptation to very specific conditions. Droughts that drove early humans to cultivate grains, herd animals that could be domesticated, firewood running out, sparking innovation in fuel and energy. Civilization, in that sense, isn't the peak of intelligence. It's a byproduct of pressure, of necessity. And necessity, as it turns out, may not be universal. Throughout Earth's history, there may have been other intelligent species who never crossed that invisible line, from being smart to being technological. Intelligence, after all, is useful even without industry. It can help a species outwit predators, cooperate in hunts, form stable communities. But if the environment remains rich and forgiving, the spark that ignites civilization might never strike. Octopuses, for example, have shown signs of remarkable intelligence, puzzle solving, mimicry, even play. Yet their short lifespans and soft bodies make it unlikely they'll pass that intelligence on through culture or tool-making. But what if a more enduring creature, perhaps reptilian or avian, had both the intellect and the longevity, yet simply no drive to alter its world? In science fiction, we often imagine alien civilizations as grand empires with cities in the clouds or machines fused to flesh. But what if the truly alien civilization is the one that never builds? One that uses language to remember, ritual to encode, gesture and gaze to share truths? A civilization of minds, not machines. This reframes our understanding of what it means to be advanced. We tend to measure advancement by artifacts, pottery shards, metal tools, skyscrapers. But perhaps there have been entire epochs of intelligence that left behind only whispers, decisions not to dig, traditions that discouraged alteration, myths that revered the untouched. Could an ancient species have looked upon the Earth not as something to shape, but as something to harmonize with? And if so, what would they have left behind? No roads, no plastics, no layered sediment of industry. Maybe only fossils, perhaps even none at all, if they died in forests or oceans where time erases flesh and bone. Maybe only a faint signal in ancient soil chemistry, a curious isotope ratio, a geologic puzzle that we've yet to recognize as a footprint of thought. It's a humbling possibility that we might not be the first intelligent life to walk or swim across this planet, just the first to inscribe our thoughts in steel and circuitry. Intelligence, it seems, doesn't always crave conquest. Sometimes it listens instead of speaks, blends instead of reshapes. And yet, that silence poses a problem. In a world governed by tectonic churn and oceanic erasure, what survives long enough to tell a story? What, if anything, would still whisper our presence 100 million years from now? Would the future even know we were here? Or would we too become a ghost species, another question buried in stone? Not all ghosts wear sheets or rattle chains. Some are made of plastic, etched in stone, or whispered in the chemistry of soil. If humanity were to vanish tomorrow, what would be our legacy? Not in culture or memory, but in matter. In the slow language of the earth, written not in books, but in layers of sediment and fossilized silence, would there be a trace of us 100 million years from now? It's a strange thought, almost surreal, imagining a future so far-flung that continents have drifted, oceans reshaped, and entire mountain ranges risen and fallen, all while asking whether a Coke bottle or the skeleton of a skyscraper might still remain. Time has a way of grinding the monumental down to dust. Most human artifacts aren't built to endure even a few centuries without maintenance, let alone survive pressure, heat, and tectonics for geological ages. And yet, some things might persist, not as monuments, but as signals. Take plastics, for instance. The synthetic polymers that wrap our food, thread our clothes, and float in oceans have only existed for a blink of geological time. And yet, they do not biodegrade like wood or cloth. Instead, they fracture into microplastics, infiltrating soil, water, and even animal tissue. In landfills buried beneath future sediments, these plastic fragments might fuse with rock, forming plastiglomerates, a new kind of stone, part synthetic, part natural. One day, an alien paleontologist, or perhaps a future Earth dweller with no memory of us, might chip into a cliffside and wonder at these strange plastic-flecked fossils. But plastic is only one whisper in the deep time record. There are other signatures, less visible, but no less telling. carbon levels in the atmosphere, for instance. Since the Industrial Revolution, the burning of fossil fuels has pumped billions of tons of carbon dioxide into the skies. If Earth were a book, this would be a bold underline, an unmistakable chemical punctuation mark. In the future, this carbon spike could appear as a sudden shift in isotopic ratios preserved in rock, an anomaly in the balance of carbon-12 to carbon-13. It's subtle but unmistakable to those who know what to look for. Past events like the Paleocene-Eocene thermal maximum about 56 million years ago left similar signatures. That event was likely natural, driven by volcanic activity and methane release. But if geologists 100 million years from now were to find a comparable anomaly centered around our era, how would they interpret it? Alongside carbon, there are other chemical breadcrumbs, spikes in nitrogen from fertilizers, heavy metals from industry, radioactive isotopes from nuclear testing. These are not scattered artifacts, but planetary scale changes, the kind that leave behind a fingerprint pressed into stone. And then there is the toll taken on life itself. Mass extinctions punctuate the Earth's history like exclamation marks in an otherwise slow, drifting sentence. The dinosaurs' sudden disappearance 66 million years ago is perhaps the most famous, marked by a layer rich in iridium from a meteor strike. But in our own time, without an asteroid, we are seeing similar devastation. Entire ecosystems unravel, species vanish at accelerating rates, and biodiversity plummets. This biological thinning could be another layer in the fossil record, a sudden drop in variety, a wave of sameness replacing the chaotic richness that came before. Future scientists might puzzle over this sudden disappearance of amphibians, corals, insects, birds. They may see the rapid rise of domesticated species, cattle, chickens, dogs, and then their abrupt fall, a spike of uniform bones, followed by near silence. It's the biological equivalent of an orchestra going quiet mid-symphony. And what of our cities? Our towers of steel and concrete seem unshakable in our lifetimes, but they are fragile in the face of deep time. Without upkeep, even the tallest skyscrapers crumble within centuries. Their rebar rusts, their concrete fractures. Eventually, they collapse and are buried beneath sediment, forests, or seas. Yet in certain environments, deserts, floodplains, or volcanic ash, parts of them might fossilize. Foundations might remain as strange geometric imprints in future rocks. A city like New York might leave behind not glass and neon, but patterns of right angles pressed into ancient clay. Satellites, too, will fall. Orbit is not forever. Over millennia, our artificial moons will decay, re-entering the atmosphere in blazing arcs. Some will vaporize. Others, like old probes on the Moon or Mars, might remain untouched, a museum of silent relics scattered across space. On Earth, some fragments of these satellites might survive their fall, embedding themselves in the crust like high-tech meteorites. Taken together, these signals, plastics, carbon spikes, mass extinctions, artificial alloys, form what many scientists are calling the Anthropocene layer. It's a thin slice of geological time, but it is sharply distinct. If the planet's history were a library of stone, the Anthropocene would be a bookmarked page, crisp, recent, and deeply strange. And that leads to a curious possibility. If an industrial civilization had existed millions of years before us, perhaps in the Permian or the Ordovician, would we be able to see its layer? Would it too have left behind a carbon anomaly, a die-off of species, a thin smear of strange metals or plastics, or their equivalent? Not just in body, but in footprint. Civilization, it turns out, may be far more fragile than it feels. But its ghost may linger, not in monuments or memory, but in the soil's chemical whisper, in the bones of animals we never meant to erase, and in the rocks that remember everything. If we want to know whether we're alone in history, or merely the latest chapter, we'll need to learn how to read the Earth's long memory more closely. And that means turning our attention to the next clue, the geological fingerprints of industry and what they might truly reveal. Beneath our feet lies a time machine pressed into layers of sediment and stone. Not a gleaming, humming contraption of chrome and wires, but an archive. One that doesn't blink or whisper, but simply waits. It is here, in the silence of the rock record, that Earth holds its oldest memories. But not all memories are written in bone. Some are far more subtle. Burn marks in the air, unnatural molecules woven into soil, and invisible scars etched into the chemistry of the oceans. These are the fingerprints of industry, and they linger long after we're gone. Imagine a world in recovery, 10 million years after the last human vanished. Forests stretch where cities once stood. Rivers carve new paths through what were once paved streets. From the surface, it might seem as though humanity never happened at all. But dig deep enough, and the illusion begins to fade. Among the most telling signatures of our time are the combustion traces, carbon-rich shadows left by our use of fossil fuels. Coal, oil, and natural gas, once buried under pressure for hundreds of millions of years, have been burned in mere centuries, releasing carbon that had been locked away since before the dinosaurs. The result is a sharp spike in atmospheric carbon, so dramatic that future geologists, should any exist, could spot it like a flare in the planet's layered diary. These combustion events don't just leave behind carbon, they alter the isotopic ratios of the atmosphere itself. A fingerprint in the form of lighter carbon isotopes, indicating the burning of ancient organic material, embeds itself in ice cores and ocean sediment. In essence, our machines and power plants have left chemical signatures as distinctive as a thumbprint on glass. But combustion is only part of the story. What about the synthetic compounds we've invented? Molecules that don't occur naturally and wouldn't exist without intelligent design. Pesticides, flame retardants, refrigerants, and pharmaceuticals, many of these chemicals resist degradation. Some cling to soil particles for thousands of years, long after the ecosystems they were meant to control have changed or disappeared. These ghost molecules might outlive our buildings, our books, and even our bones. The soil becomes a canvas on which these substances are painted, layer by layer, season by season. And unlike natural compounds, many of these synthetic chemicals have no known biological breakdown pathways. They don't rot, they don't evaporate, they just stay, waiting to be discovered or misinterpreted by some distant intelligence combing through ancient Earth. And then there's the ocean, a silent witness to civilization's rise and fall. As we burned fuels and changed landscapes, we released not just carbon into the air, but also nitrogen, phosphorus, and heavy metals into the seas. Oceans, once teeming with balance, began absorbing more than they could buffer. The acidification of the oceans is not a metaphor, it's a measurable, chemical shift. Shell-building organisms, from tiny plankton to coral reefs, began struggling as pH levels dropped. A subtle rebalancing of marine chemistry began, and with it, a reshuffling of marine life. If left uninterrupted, this shift could be immortalized in the sediment layers of the seafloor, microfossils disappearing, species abruptly ending, others emerging or migrating in response. Among these layers are traces of mercury, lead, cadmium, elements we pulled from the earth to fuel our technologies, but which eventually washed into rivers and out into the sea. Over time, these accumulate in sedimentary records, forming bands of unnatural concentration. Future researchers might puzzle over the sudden rise in certain metals, trying to piece together what it meant. A war? A planetary catastrophe? Or simply a civilization unaware of the long-term cost of progress? Some scientists have likened these geological traces to the smudges left behind on an old manuscript, the kind where someone spilled ink or scorched the edges with candlelight. These marks don't tell the full story, but they suggest that something happened here, something artificial, something intelligent. The idea becomes even more unsettling when we realize that we ourselves could be misreading past layers in the same way. If an earlier industrial civilization once rose and fell millions of years ago, perhaps in a time before mammals ruled the land, what might their fingerprints look like now? Would they also have burned fuels and altered the atmosphere? Would they too have invented durable molecules that outlasted their creators? We often assume we'd find ruins or tools, some unmistakable sign of their existence. But civilization doesn't always announce itself with monuments. Sometimes it leaves only chemistry. As we explore this idea further, one question looms in the background. If such an ancient civilization did exist, how would we even begin to detect it? What patterns would we look for? What quiet echoes in the fossil record might be mistaken for nature, but weren't? The answers may lie not in the absence or presence of artifacts, but in strange shifts and anomalies, oddities in the geologic past that don't quite fit the expected natural rhythms of the Earth. To recognize those, we must turn to another mystery: the strange, isolated signals that ripple through the deep past. The geological whispers that suggest something once interfered with the planet's natural balance and then vanished. Let's follow those whispers. Somewhere beneath our feet, in layers of soil compacted by time, lie traces of our most unintentional monuments. Not temples or tombs, not statues to fallen kings, but remnants of packaging, pavement, and polymer. The kind of objects that were never meant to last, and yet might outlive everything. If time were a sieve, most of what we cherish would slip through. But not this, not the byproducts of our age. Imagine a future geologist, tens of millions of years from now, brushing dust away from a hardened shard of plastic or a smooth bead of aluminum. To them, it might not be called trash. It might be called evidence. Human beings have forged materials the Earth never knew before, and just like a fossilized bone or an amber-trapped insect can tell us about ancient life, these synthetic creations might one day speak for us. Scientists have coined a name for them: technofossils, objects manufactured through technology alien to the natural record, yet embedded within it. Glass, for instance, is one of our oldest artificial materials, yet its properties make it almost timeless. While natural volcanic glass like obsidian exists, the clear, flat panes in our skyscrapers or smartphone screens are born of furnaces and intent. Buried deep, shielded from erosion, these might resist decay for millennia. And in the right geological setting, they could harden into clues that shimmer in ancient strata like crystal thoughts left behind. Concrete is another candidate, ubiquitous, unassuming, poured over cities, foundations, highways. Its composition mimics stone, but its structure is unmistakably human-made. It's a kind of artificial rock, engineered to endure. The Romans had a version of it too, and some of their harbors still hold together beneath the sea. But our modern concrete, reinforced, chemically complex, goes further. It doesn't just persist, it might be the literal bedrock of our era in the fossil record. Then there's aluminum, lightweight, versatile, and strangely rare in nature as a pure metal. Despite being the third most abundant element in Earth's crust, aluminum binds tightly to other elements, never appearing in metallic form without deliberate refinement. That means pure aluminum artifacts, cans, foils, wires, signal unmistakable technological intervention. If found encased in clay 100 million years from now, they'd raise a question. Who made this? And beyond these familiar materials, there are others, more exotic, stranger still. Plastics with polymer chains never before seen in nature, carbon fiber composites, fluoropolymers, artificial rubbers, synthetic dyes. In a sense, they are as alien to the geologic past as a spaceship would be to the Cambrian seas. These materials don't biodegrade in the way organic matter does. They persist, often fragmenting into micro and nano-sized particles that weave themselves into the dirt, into sediment, even into the bodies of living things. If an ancient industrial civilization had once arisen and fallen before us, might they have left behind their own technofossils? Materials forged from their unknown sciences, entombed within ancient rock? Would we even recognize them? Or might we dismiss them as strange minerals or dismissible anomalies folded into Earth's tumultuous history? Technofossils challenge the idea that trash is trivial. In the context of deep time, waste becomes signature. A middenscape becomes message. Archaeologists already reconstruct entire cultures from what people left behind, their pottery shards, food scraps, their waste. Now imagine doing that not over centuries, but over eons. Our trash may well be our clearest voice into the distant future. But it's not only about what we made, it's also about where it ends up. Landfills are sprawling archives of discarded intention, compressed under layers of soil. Some are already being overrun by nature, sealed by sediment. Given time, pressure, and the absence of oxygen, their contents might mineralize into fossil-like relics. You could imagine a stratum of garbage turned to stone, bottle caps, and wire mesh caught in a matrix of hardened sludge. Even our cities, those towering feats of design and ambition, leave behind more than just dust. When buildings collapse, their rebar and concrete may fracture, but they don't simply disappear. Bridges, tunnels, buried pipelines all become potential technofossils. And satellites, once our eyes in orbit, will eventually rain back to Earth, fragmenting as they burn, but not vanishing entirely. Scorched metal remnants may scatter across the landscape, some sinking into oceans, others buried beneath sand. The question becomes, if we leave such clear signs of our presence, why don't we see similar ones from any past civilization? Is it because no one came before us? Or is it that we've only just begun to look in the right way? The technofossil record isn't just about decay, it's about memory, permanence, and the way the artificial becomes part of the natural story. Civilization, after all, is not simply a cultural moment. It's also a geological one. When we dig not only into rock, but into the habits and intentions of those who came before. If such civilizations existed in Earth's deep past, would their technofossils have been preserved? Would erosion, subduction, or the sheer passage of time have erased them entirely? Or might a few strange relics have survived? Occasionally, scientists do stumble upon something that doesn't quite fit. A metallic sphere buried too deep, a trace element where none should be. Most of these anomalies are ultimately explained, filed away in the drawers of conventional science. But some whisper questions louder than answers. And so we find ourselves peering not just into the sedimentary layers of Earth's history, but into its mysteries. Could it be that the traces are already here, waiting to be recognized? Might we have already found something strange? It begins with something subtle, a strange blip in the data, a ratio of carbon isotopes that doesn't quite fit the pattern, a layer of clay rich in iridium or platinum group elements where none should be, a sudden warming pulse locked into ancient sediment, as if the planet had briefly exhaled a fevered breath millions of years ago. At first glance, it's easy to file these curiosities under the vast catalogue of Earth's chaotic past. Volcanoes, meteorites, tectonic shifts. The planet has no shortage of drama. But what if we're missing something more elusive? Not something natural, but something intentional. Hidden beneath our feet is a record of deep time, layer after layer of stone, silt, and fossil, a library not of words, but of events. And sometimes, in this stony silence, something anomalous appears. A whisper, rather than a scream. Consider the Paleocene-Eocene thermal maximum around 56 million years ago. In the span of just a few thousand years, a geological blink, Earth's temperatures surged, oceans acidified, carbon flooded the atmosphere. It's a pattern eerily familiar in today's context. Greenhouse gases, warming seas, collapsing ecosystems. But the cause of that ancient warming? Still debated. Volcanism, methane clathrates, or something else entirely? What if the fingerprints of that event, its suddenness, its scale, weren't just natural? What if they were the shadow of a vanished intelligence? Not human, not even mammalian, but something we can barely imagine, leaving behind only chemical ghosts. This is not to say that the PET proves anything of the sort, but it opens a door to the possibility that our current age, with its plastic relics and aluminum bones, may not be the first time Earth bore witness to a technological species. And if such a species had risen long before us, how would we even know? Let's look at something more peculiar. The Great Pause. It occurred hundreds of millions of years before the dinosaurs during the early Cambrian period, a time famous for the explosive diversification of life. But nestled within that explosion is an oddity, a sudden stasis in the fossil record. For tens of millions of years, evolution seems to take a break. No new major body plans, no great extinctions, just stillness, evolutionary silence. Some paleontologists chalk it up to equilibrium, ecosystems stabilizing after their big evolutionary bang, but others have asked whether this pause might suggest something else. Could there have been a disruption, a reset that left few traces? Even the absence of change can be a clue if you're listening for quiet. Then there are the isotope records, chemical signatures preserved in ancient rocks, like atomic time capsules. Scientists have found carbon anomalies that seem to reflect sudden inputs of light carbon, possibly from massive methane releases. But methane can come from natural sources, or industrial ones. We know today that fossil fuel combustion also leaves behind altered carbon isotope ratios, shifting the balance between carbon-12 and carbon-13. Could a similar shift buried in the deep past be more than a geological hiccup? And what of geological anomalies that defy easy explanation? Vast swathes of vitrified rock, for example, found in certain ancient fortresses and hilltops around the world, some of which show signs of being melted by heat far beyond what typical fires could produce. Conventional theories suggest accidental fires or lightning, but none fully satisfy the scale of melting. And while most of these are dated to human history, their curious nature reminds us how difficult it can be to reconstruct the full truth from charred stone. Then there are the hexagonal stone columns of the Giant's Causeway in Ireland, the eerie spherical stones of Costa Rica, or the polygonal megalithic walls of Peru. These are not necessarily remnants of forgotten civilizations, but they show how nature and time can weave together to produce structures that challenge the limits of our understanding, and how easily the truly artificial could vanish in plain sight. Because that's the crux of it: vanishing. If a civilization existed tens or hundreds of millions of years ago, what would be left? Not their bones. Fossils are rare, and bones dissolve in time. Not their cities. Concrete erodes, steel rusts, and glass eventually returns to sand. Perhaps only a faint chemical aftertaste in the strata or a lone isotope trail would remain. We might have already found something strange, but we wouldn't know what we were looking at. Science, of course, must be cautious. It's built on skepticism, on not jumping to conclusions. But curiosity is freer. It asks the questions science has not yet learned how to answer. Like, what if Earth has been host to more than one rise? What if civilizations are not rare flukes, but natural consequences of time and biology? Like waves on a shore, each one breaking and fading before the next begins. Perhaps the real question isn't, did they exist? But if they did, where are they now? And with that, we find ourselves standing at the edge of an even larger silence. Not beneath our feet, but above our heads. For if intelligent life could rise and fall on Earth unnoticed, what might be happening across the vast expanse of stars? Perhaps the real mystery is not just ancient civilizations here, but the absence of any visible ones out there. A cosmic quiet that echoes across the galaxy. And so, we must turn our eyes outward, toward the stars, and return to a question that has haunted thinkers for decades, a question known as the Fermi paradox. In the vast, quiet darkness between stars, there's a question that keeps echoing, one that scientists, dreamers, and philosophers have been whispering for decades. If intelligence is not unique to us, if life blooms across the cosmos like flowers in spring, then where is everyone? We've been listening for signals, scanning the sky for artificial radio waves, infrared pulses, or cosmic patterns that don't quite fit. And yet, the silence remains, a silence so absolute it hums. This is the Fermi paradox in its most distilled form. If the universe is old, vast, and seemingly fertile with planets and possibility, why haven't we seen any evidence of other civilizations? Maybe we've been asking the wrong kind of question. Instead of looking outward and forward, what if we turn the telescope inward, or perhaps backward, into the layers of our own world, our own past? If civilizations rise, burn brightly, and then vanish, could that explain the silence? Not because no one ever came, but because no one ever lasted. The universe may be teeming with life, but intelligence, especially the kind that builds cities and splits atoms, could be like a flashbulb in deep time, a brief flare quickly snuffed out. Cosmic silence, then, wouldn't be loneliness. It would be turnover. Civilizations may not travel the stars, not because they lack the means, but because they rarely endure long enough to try. Consider the average lifespan of a mammalian species, around 1 million years. Not long at all on geological or cosmic scales. Even modern humans have only been writing things down for about 5,000 years. Industrialization? Barely a few centuries. If another intelligent species had risen on Earth tens of millions of years ago, built machines, dreamed of stars, and then disappeared, how would we know? That's the unsettling mirror of the Fermi paradox. Perhaps it's not that Earth is alone, but that it's typical. A planet that, like many others, birthed intelligence and then buried it. If that's the case, then civilizations, ours included, might be less like enduring beacons and more like sparks from a campfire. Bright, fleeting, gone. There's also a kind of eerie comfort in that idea. It suggests that the rise of a civilization isn't miraculous, but natural, perhaps even inevitable. But so is the fall. Catastrophe doesn't need to be dramatic. Sometimes it's subtle. A shift in climate, a loss of biodiversity, a slow crumbling of complexity, a forgotten language carved into stone, abandoned in the rain. Could Earth be one of many failed experiments? A place where intelligent life flickered and fizzled, not just once, but again and again. Each time, perhaps, the slate was wiped clean, by ice, by fire, by time. Or maybe the Earth has never truly failed. Maybe it's simply the kind of planet that resets, a cosmic etch-a-sketch, shaking itself every few 100 million years just to see what comes next. There's also another possibility, more chilling than comforting. What if long-lived civilizations are rare not by chance, but by nature? What if intelligence contains the seed of its own undoing? Not just here on Earth, but everywhere. A universal self-destruct mechanism hidden inside curiosity, technology, or hubris. Like a galactic pattern of rise and ruin repeated endlessly across the stars. In this view, the silence isn't absence, it's aftermath. The ruins are just too distant, or too old, or too different to recognize. Maybe we've been walking past them all along, buried in desert sands or frozen beneath Antarctic ice. Maybe the past and the stars are both graveyards, but also gardens, waiting for something new to bloom. And what if the great filter, the barrier that prevents civilizations from enduring, lies not ahead of us, but behind? What if we are, against all odds, one of the rare species to make it through the early chaos of existence? If that's true, then this quiet moment in history is more precious than we realize. A brief window between destruction and transcendence. A choice. The Fermi paradox, then, becomes less of a question and more of a reflection. Maybe the silence isn't cosmic, it's introspective. A riddle we answer not by looking outward, but inward. Are we listening because we expect an answer, or because we're afraid we might be the answer? Still, if civilizations rise and fall like waves against the shore, some might manage to reach further, to leave something behind, a mark, a message, a legacy that endures beyond their end, something that outlives not just their cities and species, but time itself, which leads us to wonder. What does it take to leave a legacy on a cosmic scale? How would an advanced civilization measure its growth, its progress, its permanence? And if one did manage to escape the fall, what kind of footprints would they leave across the stars? That's where we now turn our gaze, not just to the ruins or the mysteries, but to the grand scale of possibility itself. The vision of what a civilization might become if it endures. As we peer into the future of our own civilization, it's hard not to wonder about what true mastery over time and energy might look like. If human civilization continues to evolve, could we one day join the ranks of an exclusive club? A club of civilizations that harness not only the power of their planet, but the very forces of the stars themselves. This is the realm of the Kardashev scale, a framework that envisions the technological ascent of a species through the lens of energy consumption. The scale, proposed by Russian astrophysicist Nikolai Kardashev in 1964, is deceptively simple. It categorizes civilizations by the amount of energy they can control. A Type 1 civilization can harness all the energy available on its home planet: geothermal, wind, solar, and nuclear. Type 2. Civilizations extend their reach beyond the planet, tapping into the energy of their own star, perhaps through something like a Dyson sphere. Finally, Type 3 civilizations control the energy of an entire galaxy, wielding power unimaginable to us today. The beauty of this scale is its simplicity, but it opens a vast field of possibilities. It is not just about energy, it is about the evolution of civilizations, their priorities, their technologies, and their legacies. So, let's ask ourselves, where does humanity stand on this scale? We've made remarkable strides, certainly. We've unlocked the power of the atom and have learned to tap into the Earth's resources on an unprecedented scale. Yet, we're still far from the energy mastery that would mark us as a Type 1 civilization. We currently consume only a small fraction of the potential energy our planet offers, and our use of renewable sources is still in its infancy compared to the scale of what a true Type 1 could achieve. Our energy infrastructure, while vast and growing, is still fragile. We remain at the mercy of natural disasters, political upheaval, and resource depletion, all of which threaten to undo our progress. But what if there were others before us? Imagine an ancient civilization on Earth, long gone but capable of harnessing the full power of this planet, bending wind, sun, and geothermal energy to its will. Could such a civilization have reached Type 1? Perhaps in some forgotten epoch, Earth was home to beings who lived harmoniously with the planet's energy, mastering it in ways we can barely comprehend. Perhaps they tapped into the Earth's deep energy reserves in ways that left no trace, leaving behind only fragments of their advanced technologies buried deep within the strata of our planet. If such a civilization existed, they might have left only whispers in the fossil record, tiny clues that could one day point us toward their existence, if we are wise enough to listen. The Kardashev scale offers more than just a path to the future. It's a framework for reflecting on the past. If a civilization were to reach Type 2, what signs would we look for? A civilization with such power would be no longer bound to the Earth. It would harvest the energy of the stars themselves. Could we detect such a civilization? perhaps through infrared signals, unnatural patterns in the cosmic background radiation, or massive constructions near distant stars. The mere presence of such energy usage would alter the fabric of the universe, making their existence detectable even across vast cosmic distances. And what about a Type 3 civilization? A civilization that spans an entire galaxy, capable of harnessing the energy output of billions of stars. The scale of such an achievement is almost unfathomable. The energy signatures alone would be immense, dwarfing anything we could produce. Perhaps we would detect their presence through shifts in galactic structures, subtle ripples in gravitational waves, or strange anomalies in the distribution of cosmic matter. It's not so much a question of if such civilizations could exist, but rather how they would leave their mark. Would they terraform entire solar systems, or would they choose to leave their stars undisturbed, their vast technologies hidden in plain sight? But returning to Earth and to us, could we ever reach this level? Type 1 is a distant goal, but it's possible. We are, after all, on a trajectory. The real question may be whether we can avoid the pitfalls that other civilizations, past or future, might fall into. The road to Type 1 is paved with challenges: managing the environment, balancing growth with sustainability, and building technologies that can withstand the test of time. It's a matter of stewardship, not just of energy, but of the very planet we inhabit. The Kardashev scale gives us a lens through which to examine our own place in the cosmos, not just as a species, but as caretakers of the Earth itself. It reminds us that with great power comes great responsibility. Could past civilizations have reached the precipice of Type 1? It's tantalizing to think about. Perhaps they did, and we are the inheritors of their failures, or their lessons. Perhaps the Earth was home to beings who reached beyond their limits, using too much too fast, and thus vanished, leaving only their echoes behind. In such a scenario, the planet itself might bear the scars of their ambition, like the worn grooves of an old record that once played beautiful music, now silent. As we contemplate the Kardashev scale, we are confronted with the fundamental question of legacy. What kind of mark will we leave on this planet? What will future generations inherit from us, and how will they understand our relationship with energy? Will we be the ones who usher in a new era of civilization, or will we become another forgotten chapter in the history of Earth? The possibility that we are not the first to reach for the stars, and perhaps the first to fail, leaves us with a sobering reflection. But it also inspires. If we can avoid the mistakes of the past, if we can learn to harmonize with the forces that govern our world, perhaps we too will leave a legacy worthy of our place in the universe. The Kardashev scale is not just a measuring stick for energy, it is a mirror, reflecting not only our potential but also our responsibilities. As we consider the energy of the stars, we cannot help but wonder, what would it be like to find evidence of another civilization that has risen before us? Could the traces they left behind still be out there, waiting for us to discover? What techno-signatures might we uncover, hidden in the fabric of the cosmos, waiting for the right eyes to see them? The search continues, and the answers, like the stars themselves, remain just beyond our reach. But the journey forward, toward understanding, toward discovery, toward legacy, is one we must continue to pursue, with humility and wonder in equal measure. Imagine the endless reaches of space, an ocean of darkness, punctuated by faint stars and galaxies scattered like grains of sand. Somewhere in this vast expanse, there might be other civilizations, just like ours, leaving their traces in the cosmic wilderness. But how would we find them? What kind of marks, left over time, could hint at an advanced civilization's existence? If we're searching for other intelligent beings in the universe, we need to understand the signs of their technological presence. The question isn't just whether they are out there, but how we might spot their traces. After all, it's easy to assume that extraterrestrial life would be like us, using radios and satellites, emitting signals that can travel across vast distances. But what if they're not? What if they've evolved beyond the kinds of markers we expect to see? This is where the concept of technosignatures becomes essential. Artifacts or emissions that indicate a civilization's advanced use of technology, whether it's a faint light from a distant megastructure or the heat of their activities spilling into space. Take, for example, the idea of Dyson spheres. These theoretical megastructures are built around stars to capture and utilize their energy. Imagine a civilization so advanced that they could encase their sun in a massive array of panels, harvesting all of its energy for their own purposes. The energy released from such a structure wouldn't be like anything we typically observe from stars. Instead of a steady, bright light, we would see irregular fluctuations, possibly even the signature of waste heat. Waste heat, the byproduct of an advanced society's technological activities, would radiate into space, a subtle but distinct marker of artificial life. But even something as large as a Dyson sphere might not be enough to make a civilization detectable if we're not looking for it in the right way. Perhaps we're looking in the wrong places altogether. We know that Earth's civilizations, even those as advanced as ours, leave behind very specific traces, from atmospheric changes to light pollution and radio emissions. But what if civilizations of the past didn't leave such clear footprints? What if they were more transient, fading away before their technological footprints could truly imprint the universe? Civilizations can disappear, whether from natural disasters, self-destruction, or other unforeseeable factors. Imagine an advanced society on Earth disappearing before they could ever encase their sun in a Dyson sphere or send out powerful signals into space. The idea isn't just speculative, it's based on our own history. Ancient civilizations have risen and fallen, leaving behind barely a whisper in the fossil record. If they could vanish so completely, could other civilizations have followed a similar fleeting path? This brings us to the concept of waste heat and space junk, two potential markers that might tell us if a civilization once existed but is no longer around. Space junk, the debris of broken satellites and discarded machinery, is something we already create as a species. Imagine, however, an entire fleet of decommissioned satellites or abandoned megastructures scattered across the cosmos. We might be able to detect these remnants, orbiting dead planets, like discarded toys in the vast backyard of the universe. But even these remnants may be difficult to distinguish from natural space phenomena, unless we know exactly what we're looking for. And then there's the possibility that we're simply looking at the wrong time. The universe is vast, and our search for extraterrestrial life is still in its infancy. We've only just begun to develop the technology that could allow us to observe distant stars and galaxies in more detail. What if other civilizations have long since disappeared, or are just beginning to rise, and our search is blind to their existence? Time, in this grand cosmic scale, is more than just a measurement. It's a factor that might change everything. Civilizations may exist in a pattern we haven't yet uncovered, with windows of visibility so brief that we might miss them entirely. Just as human civilizations are prone to rise and fall, so too could others across the stars, only their life cycle could be even shorter than ours, impossible to catch in the blink of an eye. The notion that Earth could be the only home to intelligent life seems increasingly unlikely as we learn more about the universe. But perhaps our understanding of life, intelligence, and the signals that would point us to others is too narrow. If civilizations are transient, leaving behind only faint echoes, perhaps it is not that there is no one out there, but that we're simply not equipped to hear them. Yet, the quest to find those faint echoes persists, driven by our insatiable curiosity. The search for technosignatures, whether they come in the form of Dyson spheres, waste heat, or cosmic debris, is only the beginning. But one thing is certain. As we continue to probe the depths of the universe, we will face one fundamental question. What, exactly, are we hoping to find? Could the idea of a lost civilization from a distant past, one that left no obvious marks in space, be more than just a theory? Perhaps it's a possibility worth considering as we look ahead. As we wonder what may be out there beyond our reach, we can't help but ask, could our own civilization one day vanish in such a way, leaving only faint traces behind? If Earth's past civilizations are anything to go by, the answer might be far closer than we think. The search for lost civilizations, whether from ancient Earth or far beyond, raises profound questions. And what if those questions aren't just about the civilizations that might have existed, but about the very nature of memory itself? Could myths and legends, the stories passed down through generations, hold fragments of truths about past worlds that once thrived? What if Atlantis or Lemuria were not mere fables, but echoes of something real? Ancient civilizations that left behind nothing but memory and myth. And so we turn our gaze from the stars to the depths of the earth, where those ancient stories may yet hold the keys to understanding not just our own past, but the greater tapestry of life that stretches across the cosmos. In the quiet corners of our collective imagination, there are whispers of ancient lands swallowed by the seas, civilizations long past yet still echoing in the myths of our modern world. Stories of mighty civilizations, advanced beyond their time, rising and falling with the waves, persist across cultures. Could they be mere stories, or are they fragments of real history, memories of civilizations that once walked the earth only to vanish? Among these tales, the legends of Atlantis and Lemuria stand out, each carrying with it a sense of mystery, loss, and wonder. What if these myths are not just fanciful creations, but encoded memories of something deeper? The story of Atlantis, as told by the philosopher Plato, has fascinated and perplexed scholars for centuries. In his dialogues Timaeus and Critias, Plato describes a powerful, technologically advanced civilization that existed over 9,000 years before his time, only to sink into the ocean in a single day and night of catastrophic events. While Plato presented the tale as a historical account, many have questioned whether it was a mere allegory, an idealized warning about the dangers of hubris and moral decay. Yet, some have wondered, could Plato's Atlantis be more than just fiction? Was it possible that he was preserving a memory of a real civilization, one that existed long before our own? The idea that Atlantis might not be purely allegorical is intriguing. Some researchers have suggested that Plato's description aligns closely with the geography and history of various ancient cultures, from the Minoans of Crete to the ancient Egyptians. These civilizations, like Atlantis, were known for their advanced knowledge, art, and technology. The eruption of the Thera volcano around 1600 BCE, for example, decimated the Minoan civilization and caused massive tsunamis, possibly inspiring the tale of Atlantis' sudden and dramatic fall. The question arises, could there be a real event buried beneath Plato's allegory, a distant echo of a cataclysmic disaster that erased a once great civilization from the Earth's surface? Across the world, the idea of sunken lands stretches far beyond the Greek world. One of the most compelling examples is the concept of Lemuria. This mythical land, first proposed in the 19th century by zoologist Philip Sclater, was imagined as a vast continent that once spanned the Indian and Pacific Oceans. Sclater suggested that the landmass had sunk beneath the waves, leaving only remnants in the form of various species that seemed to have no connection to other continents. While modern science has debunked the existence of Lemuria as a literal place, the idea persists in various spiritual and pseudo-scientific circles. Could there be something more to the myth? Could Lemuria, like Atlantis, be an echo of a civilization lost to time, obscured beneath the layers of Earth's geological history? The allure of these stories lies not just in their mysterious origins, but in the possibility that they contain hidden truths about human history. In many cultures, there are similar tales of once great civilizations that have fallen into ruin. The Sumerians spoke of a time before their own civilization, of the antiquity of the gods, a time when a great flood erased the world's previous inhabitants. Native American tribes have stories of an ancient land known as Aztlan, a place said to be lost beneath the waves. Even in ancient China, there are legends of the 3 sovereigns and 5 emperors who are sometimes described as living during an age of advanced technology long before recorded history. These myths, when examined together, suggest that perhaps we are not merely dealing with isolated fables, but with a collective memory shared by many cultures, echoes of something real. What if the flood myths, the tales of lost civilizations, and the memories of cataclysmic events are not just the products of human imagination, but are encoded history? Is it possible that, like Plato's Atlantis, these stories are veiled recollections of actual events passed down through generations in a distorted form? If this is true, then it opens up profound questions about the nature of history itself. Could there have been other civilizations that, like ours, reached a certain level of technological sophistication only to fall prey to natural disasters or their own hubris? And if so, what might be left behind? The evidence we would expect to find would be subtle, almost imperceptible. Faint traces of an advanced civilization buried beneath the Earth's shifting surface, hidden in layers of sediment and time. The idea of a lost civilization, like Atlantis or Lemuria, also ties into the broader theme of human fragility. Civilizations are not permanent. They rise and fall, leaving behind only the faintest marks on the Earth. This realization invites us to reflect on the precarious nature of our own existence. What might be the fate of our own civilization 1,000 or even 10,000 years from now? If humans were not the first to walk the Earth, if there were others before us, might their ruins still lie hidden beneath the ocean, waiting to be discovered? Perhaps the greatest mystery lies not in the discovery of these ancient lands, but in the recognition that they may have once existed, and that their stories, their echoes, may still be carried within us. As we gaze upon the stars, searching for signs of alien life, we are also, in a sense, searching for the lost memories of our own past. Are we, like the civilizations before us, destined to leave behind only myths for future generations to ponder? As we delve deeper into the history of ancient myths, we can't help but wonder how many other stories, yet untold, might carry fragments of truths from civilizations lost to time. And what might we, too, leave behind? Could the flood myths be telling us more than we think? Are these ancient tales pointing to a larger pattern, one that reaches across the vastness of time, of civilizations that rise, thrive, and eventually vanish beneath the tides of time? The connection between myth and history beckons us forward, urging us to question the narratives we hold dear and to explore the possibilities of a past long forgotten. As we move from these legends into the convergence of flood myths across cultures, we are reminded that the line between fiction and history is often thinner than we think. Could these stories be clues to the truth, waiting to be unearthed in the stories we have yet to fully hear? Perhaps, in the grand sweep of time, we are not as unique as we think, and our own story might one day become part of a larger, more ancient tale. Floods. They have appeared throughout human history, not just as events recorded in ancient tablets and scrolls, but as motifs woven into the very fabric of cultures around the world. From the Bible's tale of Noah to the Epic of Gilgamesh, from ancient Sumerian texts to the myths of indigenous tribes in the Americas, the stories are remarkably consistent. Vast, destructive floods wiping out almost everything, leaving only a few survivors to start anew. What if these stories aren't simply fanciful imaginations or mere religious allegories? Could they be echoes of a shared, long-forgotten history, one that spans continents and millennia? One of the most astonishing aspects of these flood myths is their ubiquity. Over 300 distinct cultures across the globe have their own versions of this narrative. The details may differ. Sometimes it's the wrath of the gods, sometimes a heroic figure or an arc, but the core elements remain strikingly similar. There's a common theme of water engulfing the earth, of human civilization being nearly obliterated, and of life beginning anew from a single, sacred family or group. The question arises, Are all of these myths simply independent fabrications, or do they reflect a collective memory of a singular cataclysmic event passed down and distorted over generations? The idea that these myths are rooted in a single historical flood is not just the realm of ancient lore and speculative fiction. There's a growing body of scientific inquiry suggesting that large-scale, catastrophic floods may have occurred at various points in Earth's history, possibly influencing the creation of these stories. These are not small, isolated events, but massive, world-altering occurrences. The geological evidence for such catastrophes is compelling, though often buried under layers of time. For example, many scientists point to the end of the last ice age, when glaciers melted, raising sea levels dramatically and flooding previously dry lands. Imagine a world where the seas rise swiftly, drowning coastlines, submerging cities, and transforming the environment so drastically that the survivors of such an event might have only the faintest traces left of their past civilizations. Some of the most intriguing evidence comes from the scientific study of ancient megafloods. One of the most famous is the Black Sea Deluge Hypothesis. Around 7,500 years ago, the Mediterranean Sea breached a natural dam and flooded what was once a freshwater lake, the Black Sea. This would have inundated vast areas, wiping out coastal settlements and altering the landscape forever. Was this a localized event, or could it have been part of a larger, worldwide pattern of rising waters at the close of the last ice age? If the survivors were scattered across the globe, could they have carried with them the memory of this cataclysm, embedding it into the folklore of their descendants? The scientific community has proposed other mechanisms for massive floods. Comet strikes, for instance, have been suggested as potential causes of world-changing events. A comet impact could trigger immense tsunamis, earthquakes, and fires, leaving a trail of devastation that might have been remembered for generations, even if the physical evidence was slowly eroded by time. There's also the possibility of a global flood caused by the melting of the Laurentide ice sheet. As the ice sheets retreated, they released vast quantities of fresh water, pouring into the oceans and raising their levels. For ancient people, this would have been an unfathomable disaster, a catastrophe so large it might have been woven into their collective consciousness as the foundation for future myth-making. But what if there were multiple such floods, occurring not just at the end of one ice age, but multiple times throughout Earth's history? Each disaster could have left traces not in the form of floodwaters themselves, but in the soil, the sediments, and the bones of the creatures who perished. The gradual erosion of these traces might have left only fragments that could have been transformed into myth over millennia. Could the flood stories that appear in so many cultures really be the remnants of several different cataclysmic events, each one leaving a different set of survivors and memories to pass down? The possibility that ancient floods were tied to larger, cyclical geological events also brings us to another question. What role does the human psyche play in this? Humans are creatures of pattern recognition, always searching for meaning in the chaos around them. Floods, in this sense, might represent not just a physical event, but a metaphor for the cyclical nature of life, death, and rebirth. Perhaps these stories were shaped by early humans' attempts to understand the uncontrollable forces of nature, which they experienced but could not fully comprehend. When the floodwaters receded, what was left in their wake? The survivors, forever changed, clung to the myth of the flood as a reminder of their origins, a warning of nature's capacity for destruction. But why are the survivors always so few, and why are they often portrayed as starting a new, more virtuous world? The narrative of a new beginning, of humanity rising from the floodwaters, speaks to something deeply symbolic. It is not just a retelling of a traumatic event, but a reflection of the resilience of life, the cyclical nature of civilizations themselves. Each flood story, in its own way, tells us that from the ashes of the old, something new and perhaps better will rise. This promise of renewal might be why the myth persists so universally across cultures, because it speaks to something timeless within us all, the hope that even after great destruction, we can rebuild. As we look at these ancient flood myths and the scientific possibilities they suggest, the convergence of these two realms, myth and geology, becomes more intriguing. Are the floods merely symbolic, or are they grounded in historical events so distant that we've lost any other trace of them? If such events did occur, how could they have shaped the development of early civilizations, even influencing their beliefs and myths? And what does it mean for us today, in a time when we are increasingly aware of our own vulnerability to natural disasters and the potential for climate change to reshape the Earth once again? The more we examine the convergence of myth and geology, the more we realize that these ancient tales may hold more than a fragment of truth. They may be our oldest and most enduring connection to the cataclysms that shaped the planet long before humans as we know them came into being. As we contemplate these stories, we might begin to wonder, what if there is more to them than just metaphor? What if they are not only a reflection of human imagination, but a memory encoded and passed down of a world before ours, before our civilization? And so, as the waters of ancient floods recede, we are left with echoes, faint memories of a time long past, perhaps the very key to unlocking the mysteries of our own origins. But are the gods of these ancient stories simply the survivors of a forgotten age? Could they be the last witnesses to a world that once was, and might, in some form, be remembered again? This line of questioning, one that dances between myth and history, opens up another door, one where gods themselves may have been more than just divine figures. They may have been the last remnants of a civilization lost to time, surviving the cataclysms that wiped away the rest. Could these gods have been the survivors of the very floodwaters that reshaped Earth's history? Could the myths of gods living among humans be rooted in something more than legend? In many ancient cultures, gods were not distant, ethereal beings, but tangible figures who walked among us. They were skilled, wise, and often equipped with tools or knowledge that seemed far beyond the capabilities of those they interacted with. When the Sumerians spoke of the Anunnaki, the ancient Greeks of Prometheus, and the Egyptians of Thoth, they weren't just recounting stories of divine power. What if, instead, they were remembering encounters with beings from an age long past, an age of knowledge and technology now lost to us? Could these gods, revered as creators and saviors, have been survivors of a civilization predating ours, leaving behind their advanced wisdom as part of a mythological narrative? The idea that ancient gods were not supernatural entities, but survivors of an ancient, forgotten civilization, fits into a pattern of stories passed down through millennia. When these figures appeared, they didn't just impart spiritual teachings. They shared practical knowledge: agriculture, metalworking, architecture, and mathematics. These gifts were not perceived as the work of gods, but as advanced, almost magical skills that transformed human life. In the myth of Prometheus, for example, the Titan gave fire to humanity, a symbol of knowledge and enlightenment. Could this be a memory of early humans encountering an advanced culture that had access to the secrets of fire and metallurgy long before we learned to harness these elements? The mythological accounts of gods teaching humanity the basics of civilization often focus on agriculture, tools, and the control of natural forces. The Epic of Gilgamesh tells of gods who shared agricultural knowledge, and the Bible's tale of Adam and Eve echoes the idea of humans being granted knowledge that set them apart from the natural world. Such stories, when viewed through the lens of the Silurian Hypothesis, could be interpreted as garbled memories of interactions between humans and survivors of a more technologically advanced culture. What if these gods were simply advanced beings, perhaps using tools that seemed indistinguishable from magic to the people of that time? Could their extraordinary feats have been the products of technology rather than divine intervention? If we consider the possibility that the first civilizations existed long before humanity's recorded history, the role of gods in these origin myths takes on new dimensions. Ancient civilizations often describe their gods as bringing civilization to the people, teaching them skills like weaving, plowing, and building. In Mesopotamia, the gods of the Sumerians were credited with teaching humanity how to write and construct cities. In many Native American cultures, the trickster gods imparted crucial knowledge for survival in the harsh landscapes of the Americas. The question then arises, were these gods imparting knowledge from a lost, ancient technology that had been passed down through generations of survivors? Could these myths be an echo of something far older, something that spoke of a time when humans weren't the first to dominate the planet? A particularly intriguing element of these myths is the widespread association of gods with the stars. In ancient Egypt, the gods were said to have descended from the stars, bringing divine knowledge with them. The Dogon people of Mali have a detailed ancient understanding of the star system Sirius, knowledge that seems too precise to have been passed down through traditional means. What if these stories were the product of encounters with travelers from other advanced civilizations, or even survivors from a time when humanity was not alone on Earth? Could this star knowledge be a remnant of a civilization so advanced that their very presence among the stars was interpreted as godly? Moreover, the appearance of gods often coincided with a sudden leap in human development. Humans began to domesticate animals, cultivate the land, and build monumental structures, advancements that marked the transition from nomadic hunter-gatherers to settled agricultural societies. Were these divine interventions simply the result of an ancient civilization's survivors providing knowledge to accelerate the development of early humans? Perhaps the sudden development of cities in the ancient world, the rapid emergence of writing systems, and the creation of monumental architecture weren't just the result of gradual human progress. They could have been influenced by a far earlier, technologically advanced society that laid the groundwork for what became human civilization. This possibility is not confined to the mythologies of a few cultures. The flood myths we explored earlier suggest that ancient civilizations may have existed and even flourished before humans as we know them emerged. These societies might have been so advanced that their technologies, once misunderstood, were transformed into divine power in the eyes of simpler, less advanced cultures. It's possible that the stories of gods teaching humanity about agriculture, medicine, and craftsmanship reflect the survival of knowledge passed down from these lost civilizations. Could these myths be the distorted memories of a world-changing event, like a cataclysmic flood or a meteor strike that wiped out the original civilization? What if these gods were, in fact, the survivors, offering the little they had left of their once great technology to the next iteration of life on Earth? One could imagine these survivors emerging from a time of destruction, using their knowledge sparingly. They may have been reluctant to reveal too much, knowing that humans were not yet ready to understand the full extent of their teachings. The stories of gods intervening in key moments of human history, guiding kings, granting wisdom to rulers, and sharing the tools of progress, could then be seen not as the work of deities, but as the actions of enlightened beings trying to steer humanity away from repeating the same mistakes that led to the fall of their own civilization. Yet, how do we reconcile this idea with the deep connection humans have to their spiritual and mythological traditions? Are these gods and heroes merely products of human imagination, or do they represent the remains of a forgotten age? Perhaps, in a way, both are true. Human minds, in their attempts to comprehend a world beyond their immediate understanding, might have created these gods, weaving them into the fabric of mythology. At the same time, these gods could be based on real historical figures, survivors of a time when humanity was not the first intelligent civilization. The ancient tales we tell may be more than mere fiction. They could be fragments of a vast, lost history, encoded in symbols and allegories that hint at a time when humanity was just beginning its journey from the remnants of a civilization much older than our own. And as we look to the future, we may realize that our own myths, our stories of technology, progress, and the rise of civilization might one day become the foundations of future generations' beliefs about their origins. As we peel back the layers of myth and history, it becomes clear that the story of human civilization is far more complex than we have imagined. The idea that gods might have been survivors of an earlier age opens up a new way of thinking about our origins. But as we contemplate these ancient narratives, we find ourselves faced with more questions than answers. What if the gods were real people, their knowledge and technology so advanced that we mistook them for divine beings? And if they were real, what happened to the civilization they came from? The tale of the gods, like all stories of our past, may hold a key to understanding the world that existed long before us. As we continue to explore the mysteries of deep time, the line between myth and history blurs. Perhaps the next chapter of this story lies not in the distant past, but in the future, where the remnants of an ancient civilization might one day be uncovered, and we will finally understand the truth behind the gods that shaped us. And yet, as we ponder the possibilities of ancient civilizations and their legacies, we are reminded that history, whether written or whispered, often leaves more questions than answers. But what if the stories we tell today about our own civilization and its fate might one day become part of a much larger narrative? Could the echoes of our world resonate through time, reaching future generations who will wonder about the civilization that once walked the earth, just as we now wonder about those who came before us? This line of thought, both exhilarating and humbling, leads us to explore another fascinating realm, the way modern science fiction mirrors some of these ancient ideas. What if our speculative fiction is not just a reflection of our current fears and hopes, but a glimpse into a future where the lessons of lost civilizations echo through the stars? As we look to the stars, often the imagination takes us beyond our modern age, tracing lines back to an ancient past, beyond the reach of recorded history. It's not hard to see why. Across millennia, humans have yearned for something more, something beyond the mundane. Science fiction, though a product of the present, carries echoes of ancient desires, ancient fears. It reaches back through time and casts an eye on what might have been, what we might have forgotten. Imagine a story set in the far future where humans, though advanced in technology, find remnants of a civilization long gone. They uncover structures so monumental, so complex, that even with all their knowledge, they can hardly comprehend their origins. The technology left behind is so sophisticated, it blurs the line between science and magic. It feels like a dream, almost too fantastical to believe. But what if this isn't just fiction? What if this narrative of discovering something ancient, something beyond comprehension, is a reflection of our own deep-seated memories of a lost past? Carl Jung, the great Swiss psychologist, introduced the idea of the collective unconscious, the notion that all humans share a reservoir of memories, symbols, and archetypes inherited over generations. These deep, universal symbols shape our myths and stories, even though we may not be aware of their origins. Jung believed that the myths we create aren't just stories, they are expressions of unconscious truths. Perhaps these ancient civilizations, gods, and forgotten knowledge we speak of are not merely fantasy. They are part of something deeper, something embedded in the collective psyche of humanity. The ancient stories we tell may not simply be tales of creativity, but rather encoded memories of a time long past, a time when humans, or beings much like us, built civilizations that rivaled our own in grandeur. This idea seems to be reflected in a vast array of cultures, where the figure of the teacher, often a godlike figure, appears again and again. The Promethean archetype, for example, appears in Greek mythology, where Prometheus, the Titan, gives humanity the gift of fire. In other cultures, gods like the Anunnaki or even figures such as Quetzalcoatl offer knowledge, teaching humanity essential skills like agriculture, writing, and metallurgy. These gods don't just walk among us, they impart the knowledge necessary for human survival. Could it be that these myths are echoes of an ancient, forgotten civilization, one that reached the pinnacle of knowledge and civilization long before us, and that this lost knowledge has been passed down through time as divine wisdom? The idea of a lost city also carries weight in these ancient stories. Atlantis, Mu, Lemuria, each represents a city of immense power, technological brilliance, and cultural depth, only to be lost to time, often by some great cataclysm. These cities are not just mere settings in a story, but symbols of an ideal, of a time when civilization achieved something truly remarkable. Whether or not these cities actually existed, their symbolism is powerful. Could these stories stem from the memories of an ancient civilization, long buried beneath the layers of time? In many ways, fiction serves as a mirror to our collective psyche. Just as mythology captures deep truths about human nature, the fiction of today reflects the fears, desires, and uncertainties of our modern world. When we look to the works of science fiction, whether it's stories of lost technologies, ancient aliens, or civilizations brought low by catastrophe, it's clear that these themes are not random. They tap into something primal within us, a longing for greatness, a yearning for a past that may have been. These tales reflect our anxieties about our current trajectory and our fascination with the idea that we may have once been part of something far greater. This desire to believe in forgotten greatness is embedded in our cultural memory. The idea of rediscovering an advanced civilization from the distant past is deeply seductive. It speaks to a part of us that craves meaning, that yearns for connection to something greater than the fleeting world we inhabit. It's as though we want to believe that our civilization isn't the first, because if it weren't, we might not be so alone in the universe. The possibility that our predecessors could have reached a level of knowledge far beyond our own suggests that perhaps we too can achieve such greatness in time. And this hope is incredibly powerful because it connects us to a vision of the future that is tied not only to our potential, but to something older, wiser, and perhaps even more profound than we can imagine. Yet we must ask ourselves, do we want to believe in this forgotten greatness simply because it gives us hope? Do we crave these stories because they promise us that our future, like that of the lost cities of myth, could be filled with brilliance and discovery? Is it our collective unconscious speaking, urging us to remember what we have lost, or to prevent us from forgetting what we might one day discover? In the end, these tales are not just stories of the past, they are projections of our own future. Fiction, like mythology, serves as a guide, a compass pointing to the unknown. It asks us to look deeper, to question our place in the universe, and to consider the possibility that the past may not be as simple as it seems. There may be more out there than we can currently comprehend, hidden beneath layers of time and memory. And as we journey into the unknown, who knows what we might uncover? Perhaps, in the end, the greatest discovery will not be in the stars, but in the forgotten worlds beneath our feet. As we consider the traces of these lost civilizations, whether through myth or through science fiction, we are reminded of our own tenuous place in the grand scheme of time. What marks will we leave behind? What will the future think of us? And as we peer into the mystery of our own geological footprint, we are left to wonder, what footprints might we one day uncover from civilizations that have long since vanished? When we look at the earth beneath our feet, it's almost as if we're walking on an ancient canvas, slowly being painted over by the ever-shifting layers of time. Every stone, every trace of human activity leaves behind something that tells a story, whether it's a building, a piece of pottery, or the very ground we've altered to serve our needs. These marks, seemingly insignificant in our short time here, are the evidence of a civilization that, for all its technological might, is bound to leave behind only whispers for future eyes to decode. But what exactly are we leaving behind? Will future beings, should they rise up from the ashes of whatever comes next, understand the story we've written? Or will it be as though we were never here at all, lost to the noise of history? Think of how we interpret fossils today, remnants of creatures that lived long before our own species. These fossilized bones and imprints speak to us, but in a language we can barely understand. What if the future is equally baffled by the remnants of our civilization? The traces we leave could be as fragmented as a puzzle half assembled. A broken smartphone, a rusted freeway bridge, or the ruins of cities. Will they hold any meaning to those who might walk the earth after us? Even our most monumental structures, like the pyramids of Egypt, seem destined to eventually crumble into sand. If the records of our civilization are relegated to mere whispers in time, will the story we wish to tell, our legacy, be understood? Legacy, in the truest sense, is the idea of something enduring, transcending the moment in which it was created. Yet, consider the vast quantity of human-made waste that continues to accumulate: plastic, discarded electronics, and pollutants in the oceans. The contrast between legacy and waste is stark, and in many ways, it's a reflection of how we choose to interact with the planet. For some, the desire for permanence leads to the creation of awe-inspiring cities, colossal art, and ideas that might last for millennia. But for others, our legacy is often marked by what we leave behind in neglect. Some of our greatest technological achievements, like the production of synthetic materials, have been instrumental in shaping modern life, but they are also a burden that future civilizations might struggle to make sense of. The difference between legacy and waste is not always clear-cut. Could what we consider waste be part of an inevitable process that future civilizations might decode? Is every discarded object a hint or simply evidence of something forgotten, lost in the tides of time? When we look at the world's sprawling cities from above, or examine the remnants of ancient empires that once ruled vast territories, we might be tempted to think that we are no different. But this urge to leave something permanent is complex. Is it driven by the need to preserve our story or to prove that we existed in the first place? Perhaps it's not just the sheer scale of our physical footprints that we should be concerned with. After all, cities decay, landscapes shift, and mountains erode. Our legacy might not reside in the literal remnants of our civilization, but in the long-term impact we leave on the Earth itself. Just as we have altered the composition of the atmosphere and the oceans, future civilizations might study how our world was forever changed by human activity. They might uncover traces of carbon emissions, the rise in global temperatures, or the mass extinction events that coincided with our technological ascent. In these remnants, they might find the story of a civilization that reached for the stars, only to leave behind evidence of a collapse it couldn't avoid. As our technologies evolve at breakneck speed, the materials we create for convenience or progress will only compound the question of what future beings will be able to make of them. Consider the microplastics that now infiltrate every corner of the planet, from the deepest trenches of the oceans to the most remote mountain ranges. What will future generations think when they discover that we, who once built towering skyscrapers and expansive networks of technology, also created substances that might persist for millions of years, far beyond our own existence? But could it be that our civilization's ultimate test lies in its ability to create something that withstands time? The idea of designing immortality, not for humans, but for our civilization itself, invites both hope and unease. Imagine if, instead of leaving behind debris, we could create structures, digital, biological, or even cultural, that were self-sustaining across the epochs. Could we leave a legacy that transcends the physical world, echoing through the minds of those who might inherit the Earth? Would such a creation, freed from the inevitability of decay, be seen as our greatest achievement or a tragic reflection of our inability to accept our own impermanence? These questions invite speculation on how we might design civilizations' immortality. The great civilizations of the past, from the Sumerians to the Aztecs, believed in the immortality of their legacies, but their creations were no match for the passage of time. Could we, in our age of digital technologies and unprecedented scientific knowledge, do better? What would such a legacy look like? Would it be a series of data streams preserved for eons, a sort of digital DNA that would allow future civilizations to reconstruct our culture? Or perhaps it would be something more intangible, ideas, stories, and knowledge so profound that they could transcend generations and epochs. As we consider this, we may find ourselves drawn back to the idea of forgotten civilizations. Perhaps in a distant future, the remnants of our time will hold as much meaning as the ruins of the ancients do to us today. A story half remembered, as fragmented as the pieces of our civilization, may someday find itself resurrected by another species, one that has learned how to read the signs of a lost age. Could the remnants of our civilization be the cultural mirror for those that follow, just as the myths and relics of ancient cultures have been the mirror for us? The future may very well hold the answers to questions we've only begun to ask. As we contemplate the traces we are leaving, it becomes clear that the story we are writing is far from finished. And as we continue to shape the world around us, perhaps we will leave behind something more than just a record of human achievement. Maybe, just maybe, we will leave a testament to our hopes and dreams for a future far beyond our own, one that will echo across time, deciphered by those who follow. This contemplation of our geological footprint, our legacy versus our waste, leaves us with a sense of both wonder and responsibility. What will we leave behind? How much of it will tell the true story of who we were? And what will it mean for those who come after us? As the Earth continues to evolve, so too will the questions about how civilizations rise, fall, and leave their marks. Could we ever design something that could endure forever? As we consider the permanence of our actions, we are left with one final thought. What if, instead of worrying about how we will be remembered, we instead focus on the potential of what we might still create in our brief time? What could humanity design for the future? An enduring story, a technological legacy, or even a timeless idea that will transcend the limitations of our mortal existence? And so, as the Earth breathes around us, we wonder, what if immortality for civilizations is not just a dream, but something we can design? When we think about the vastness of time, it's easy to imagine human civilization fading into the background like a faint whisper. Our buildings, monuments, and even our memories, though once monumental, will eventually succumb to the relentless forces of nature. But what if it didn't have to be this way? What if we could somehow design a civilization that could be remembered forever, an eternal legacy etched into the fabric of time? The idea of immortality for civilizations, much like the concept of immortality for individuals, seems tantalizing yet impossible. After all, how do you build something that defies the erosion of centuries, millennia, or even eons? The task becomes even more daunting when we consider the nature of the world we live in. Urban decay alone speaks to this transience. Cities rise, flourish, and crumble, often leaving nothing but ruins behind. Even the most significant human creations, such as the pyramids, eventually succumb to the elements, weathered and worn, standing as fragile shadows of their former grandeur. But perhaps the greatest challenge lies in the ephemera of human knowledge. In an age where information is increasingly digital, we face a dilemma. How can something intangible like a digital archive endure? We are at risk of creating what might be termed digital black holes, vast repositories of information that, over time, become inaccessible due to technological shifts. In 10,000 years, will future beings look at our online records and find nothing but corrupted files, lost links, and unreadable code? The idea that our carefully stored knowledge might simply vanish is disconcerting, yet entirely possible. To truly understand the limitations of legacy, one only needs to look at the phenomenon of nuclear waste disposal. In the 1970s, the concept of burying nuclear waste deep underground sparked an interesting challenge: how to warn future civilizations about the dangers of these toxic materials. How can you ensure that future generations, who may not even speak our language or understand our symbols, will recognize the threat? The solution proposed was nothing short of ambitious: constructing monuments that would last for thousands of years, warning future people of the danger lurking beneath their feet. Yet, even with the most advanced engineering, it's difficult to predict whether these warnings will remain intact. What if those symbols, etched in stone, become nothing more than archaeological riddles, their meanings lost to time? There's also the inherent problem with the human desire to be remembered forever. The ambition to build monuments or write great books that stand the test of time is a deeply ingrained part of the human experience. Yet, even the greatest works of art or science are subject to decay. The very materials that we use to preserve our ideas are themselves fragile. Paper, ink, and even stone eventually give way to time. Can we truly design something that will outlast the inevitable march of time? Even if we create a perfect archive of knowledge, who will be there to access it in 1,000 years? And, in a world that is constantly changing, will our ideas even be relevant, or will they be rendered obsolete by future advancements? But what if we could somehow counteract the erosion of time? What if we could design our civilization with a consciousness of deep time, embedding it into the very fabric of our cities, our technologies, and our ideas? Perhaps it's not about immortality per se, but about creating a legacy that is more resilient to the forces of decay. Like ancient myths that survive only in fragments, our legacy could persist in some form: an imprint, a trace, a whisper that echoes across the ages. Perhaps the key is to think beyond the limitations of physical structures and consider the more intangible aspects of human achievement. What if our knowledge and culture could be encoded not just in monuments or books, but in something more lasting, like genetic code or the fundamental principles of the universe itself? Could we design a form of immortality that is encoded in nature, an eternal presence in the very makeup of the world around us? These ideas, while speculative, open the door to a fascinating new dimension of what it means to leave a legacy. In the end, the question is not whether we can create a civilization that will last forever, but rather how we design our civilization to withstand the inevitable passage of time. Can we weave the fabric of our culture so deeply into the universe that it becomes inseparable from the world itself? Or will we, like all civilizations before us, become lost to time, remembered only in the echoes of our own myths? As we consider these questions, we're led to think about the ethics of legacy, what it truly means to leave something behind for future generations. What do we want to be remembered for? And what, in the grand scheme of time, does it matter if we are? These reflections invite us to ponder the deeper implications of our existence and legacy, and as we approach the end of this thought, we can't help but wonder: what does it mean to live with the knowledge that our civilization, no matter how grand, will eventually fade into the abyss of time? The pursuit of immortality, however, might just be the starting point for an even deeper exploration of the choices we make today and their impact on tomorrow. How do we navigate the ethics of legacy when faced with such vast, uncharted time? This is a question we must consider as we look ahead to the future, and perhaps as we consider the future that might have come before us. When we think about legacy, it's easy to picture towering monuments, grand gestures, and artifacts that endure through the ages. Yet, beneath these tangible symbols of our existence lies a deeper question. What should we actually leave behind? In a world where every choice seems to impact the future, is it possible to craft a legacy that transcends mere remembrance? Or do we risk leaving something more complicated? A warning, perhaps, for the future of all who come after us? This question invites us to consider what legacy really means. It's not just about how future civilizations might remember us, but also about the kind of footprints we leave in the sands of time. The balance between stewardship and consumption becomes central to this contemplation. Throughout human history, we've been both creators and destroyers, stewards of the planet and consumers of its finite resources. As we forge ahead, we face the same duality. Will we leave behind a thriving world for future generations, or will our legacy be a testament to our unchecked appetites and the consequences of our actions? Think of the world around us as a vast, delicate ecosystem, one that has evolved over billions of years. Our civilization, though advanced, is just a fleeting moment in this long timeline. We are, in many ways, custodians of a planet that has survived far longer than we have. But have we been responsible stewards, or have we simply consumed, extracting what we needed without fully understanding the impact on the whole? It's easy to think of legacy in terms of achievements, the pyramids, the moon landing, technological innovations. But what of the unseen costs, the deforestation, the plastic islands in the ocean, the species we've driven to extinction? Are we willing to recognize these as part of our inheritance too? The question of what we should leave behind isn't just about preserving monuments or artifacts. It's about the kind of mark we want to make on the world. Perhaps, instead of glorifying our conquests, our legacy should be rooted in responsibility, an awareness of the fragility of the world and our place within it. Imagine if we could look to the future and see not a world decimated by human progress, but one nurtured and protected, a place where the wisdom of stewardship transcends the hunger for consumption. Would that not be the kind of legacy worth striving for? A legacy that is not about dominance, but about collaboration with the planet and its ecosystems. But stewardship is a double-edged sword. There's a looming question here. Should our legacy be a warning? After all, we live in a time where climate change, resource depletion, and biodiversity loss are urgent realities. If future civilizations were to dig through the layers of our history, would they see the slow unraveling of a species unable to curtail its own excesses? Perhaps our legacy is not one of prosperity and greatness, but one of caution. A future world, long after we're gone, might find the remains of our cities, decayed and buried, and understand them as symbols of what happens when a civilization fails to harmonize with nature. Could our greatest contribution be this, a warning carved into the record of time for those who come after us to learn from our mistakes? This notion is not new. In fact, it has appeared in stories and myths for centuries. Many ancient cultures warned of the dangers of hubris, of a civilization that grows too proud and forgets its place in the grand scheme of things. The Tower of Babel, for example, stands as a powerful metaphor for human ambition gone awry. As humans, we often desire to reach beyond ourselves, to conquer, to dominate. Yet the stories we tell are filled with the consequences of that very desire, of civilizations brought low by their own overreaching. Could we, as a species, be writing our own version of this myth, one where the tower is not made of bricks, but of overconsumption, environmental degradation, and unchecked greed? If we accept that our legacy could, in some ways, be a warning, we must confront the idea that perhaps we will never be remembered for our grandeur. Instead, it will be the consequences of our actions that define us in the distant future. Perhaps our civilization will be understood not through our accomplishments, but through the echoes of our failures, warnings preserved in the layers of time, waiting to be uncovered by those who come after us. This shift in perspective is not easy. It requires a fundamental rethinking of what we value and what we hope to pass down. Is it enough to simply be remembered, to have our names etched into history? Or should we strive to leave behind something more profound, an understanding of our place in the world, a reminder of our responsibility to the earth and to those who will follow? It challenges us to question the very nature of legacy. Is it a monument, a work of art, a great invention? Or is it something more subtle, a quiet imprint on the world that serves as both a gift and a lesson? Perhaps in the end, the ethics of legacy are about more than what we leave behind. They are about the relationships we build and the choices we make along the way. Legacy, then, may not be something we can control. It is shaped by the choices of countless individuals, communities, and civilizations across time. But how do we influence that legacy? How do we create a world that future beings can admire, not just as a triumph, but as a reminder of the delicate balance between progress and preservation? As we contemplate these questions, we begin to feel the weight of a new kind of legacy. It's one that doesn't demand eternal remembrance, but asks for reflection and learning. And as we look toward the distant future, we realize that the answers may not lie in the monuments we build, but in the wisdom we leave behind for others to find, if they are willing to listen. This leads us to another critical question. How does ego play a role in our pursuit of legacy? Do we need to be the first, the greatest, the most remembered? Or can we step back and recognize that our place in history may not be as significant as we think? Perhaps the myth of the first civilization is more of a burden than a blessing. Human beings have an inherent desire to feel unique, distinct from all the other creatures on this planet, and perhaps from all others throughout the universe. It's woven into our cultural myths, our religious narratives, and even our scientific endeavors. The idea that we are the pinnacle of intelligence, the first civilization to reach such heights, offers comfort. It reassures us that our accomplishments matter, that we are special in some fundamental way. But what if that belief isn't entirely true? What if we are not the first? What if another civilization, long lost to time, once stood where we stand now? This need to believe in our uniqueness has shaped the very way we understand ourselves. The myth of human exceptionalism permeates our societies, reflected in everything from the ancient tales of gods creating humans to the modern search for extraterrestrial intelligence. We search the stars for signs of other civilizations not only because of the vast, uncharted frontiers, but because it's hard to imagine that we might not be alone in our intellectual and technological capacities. Yet, at the same time, we have to reconcile the fact that history has shown us many empires and civilizations that have risen and fallen, many of which, in their time, might have believed they were the first or the best. And where are they now? There's a certain quiet irony here, isn't there? If human civilization were not the first, we would have to reconsider how we view ourselves. Instead of seeing ourselves as the culmination of billions of years of evolutionary progress, we might come to view our story as part of a much larger, more complex cycle, one that has played out across eons. In this light, our current moment could be seen less as a beginning and more as a temporary flare in a much grander cosmic narrative. Perhaps we are merely the latest iteration of a pattern that repeats over deep time, a cycle of rise and fall, emergence and decay. But then, what of the idea that we are the only intelligent civilization in this universe? What does it mean for human identity to face the possibility that our intelligence may not be as rare as we think? That our existence might merely be one chapter in a much larger book written over millennia? For many, the idea of sharing the stage with another species, another civilization, feels unsettling. Our ego relies on the belief that we are the first, the ones who get it, that we stand at the zenith of creation. To challenge that would be to confront not only our place in the cosmos, but the very foundations of how we view the self. Imagine, then, the implications of discovering that an ancient civilization once walked this earth before us. The shift would be more than just historical. It would alter how we perceive our technological potential and how we define progress itself. Would it suggest that we are not so much advancing, but rediscovering? Would it force us to reevaluate what it means to be human in a world where we share the stage with ghosts from the distant past? Reframing our understanding of human identity could also involve stepping away from the ego-driven narrative of firsts and instead embracing a humbler view, one that recognizes the complexity and depth of history where multiple civilizations may have coexisted across the expanse of time. We may begin to question whether humanity's technological and intellectual advancements are truly unique to us or part of a much older, recurring pattern of development. This idea, however, does not sit easily with many. After all, it's much more comforting to believe that we are standing at the apex of civilization, with all the knowledge and potential that accompanies it. It's easier to believe that everything before us was a primitive prelude to our current triumphs. But deep down, the question lingers. What if the true story is more complex, more layered, and far older than we are willing to admit? The story of humanity as the first might be a comforting myth, but myths, however deeply ingrained, are often just the stories we tell ourselves to make sense of the world. It's possible that as we look back at the remnants of a lost civilization, we will realize that the path we are walking has already been trodden, and the questions we ask today were once asked long ago. What then would it mean to stand on the shoulders of these long-forgotten giants, looking out into the unknown with the knowledge that we are not the first to dream, to build, or to fall? Perhaps, in our search for meaning, we need to let go of the notion that our species is irreplaceable. Maybe it's time to step into the realization that we are part of a larger cycle, a cycle that has seen civilizations rise and fade, each contributing to the unfolding story of intelligence and innovation across time. What if the true value of human civilization lies not in being the first or the only, but in understanding that we are merely a chapter in an ongoing saga? If this notion feels disorienting, it's because it challenges something at the very core of human identity, the idea that we are more than just an accident of nature, but the inevitable culmination of it. It shakes the foundation of how we perceive our place in the cosmos, making us reconsider everything from our individual lives to the fate of our species. Yet, paradoxically, it's in this disorientation that we may find deeper meaning, a reminder that the search for truth often leads us not to clear answers, but to profound questions. As we ponder the question of human uniqueness, we begin to realize that the true nature of our identity may be something far less self-centered than we once imagined. Perhaps it's time to look beyond the ego and embrace the possibility that we are part of something far greater, a larger cosmic web of life and intelligence that stretches across the ages. And with that realization, we begin to wonder, what if the first civilization is not a singular event, but a recurring moment, waiting to be rediscovered? With this shift in perspective, it becomes almost inevitable to ask whether all civilizations are doomed to follow a similar arc, destined to rise and fall within the great tapestry of time. This question leads us naturally to the next exploration, where we delve into the darker side of progress, the possibility that all civilizations, regardless of their origins, may be fated to self-destruct. As civilizations rise and fall, the thought lingers like an ancient echo. Do all paths lead to destruction? The question seems as old as human history itself. From the earliest empires to the towering cities of today, there is a pattern, a rhythm that haunts us. A promise of progress is always shadowed by the specter of decline. How many once great societies, mighty in their time, have now faded into the soil, their stories only half remembered by the earth itself? And what of our own civilization? Are we merely standing at the edge of our own self-inflicted end, too wrapped up in our own accomplishments to notice the cracks beginning to form? The law of entropy, often described in scientific terms as the inevitable decline into disorder, offers a haunting framework for understanding this. Over time, systems, whether they are biological, mechanical, or societal, tend to break down. Energy dissipates, order fades, and chaos reigns. While this is a law of physics, its application to the course of human civilization seems almost poetic. From a grand perspective, every step we take forward, every technological marvel and cultural achievement seems to bring us closer to an inevitable end. Is it possible that every advancement we make only accelerates the collapse? Can civilization, by its very nature, be a self-canceling force? Look at the rise and fall of past civilizations. The ancient Sumerians, for example, who crafted the first written language and developed sophisticated urban centers, were swallowed by time's tide. The Romans, with their empire spanning 3 continents, left a legacy of culture, law, and infrastructure. Yet their own internal rot led to their downfall. The Maya, once the masters of the jungle, are now a mystery whose cities, once proud and full of life, lie silent beneath the canopy. What happened to these societies that once stood so firmly, towering above their time? Was it simply the weight of their own progress that led to their undoing? Some might argue that it's the burden of innovation that makes civilizations prone to self-destruction. Every breakthrough introduces new complexities, challenges, and unforeseen consequences. The discovery of agriculture, for instance, allowed early humans to settle in one place and build cities, but it also introduced the need for land control, inequality, and the rise of war. The advent of writing and record-keeping enabled the flourishing of knowledge, but it also birthed bureaucracy, corruption, and the manipulation of information. As civilizations grow more complex, the more potential there is for things to go awry. Then there's the environmental cost. The rise of industrialization, which brought so much wealth and power, has also led to environmental degradation that threatens the very foundation of modern society. Our burning of fossil fuels, the clearing of forests, and the depletion of natural resources have turned our progress into a paradox. While we build grander cities, we do so at the expense of the planet that sustains us. Is this the ultimate fate of every civilization? To reach its zenith only to unravel under the weight of its own creations? Even in more abstract terms, the very idea of civilization carries within it the seeds of destruction. What makes a civilization thrive is often the same thing that leads to its collapse: its reliance on its own systems. We create economic systems, political systems, and technological systems, all of which demand constant growth and innovation to survive. But growth, as we know, cannot continue indefinitely. The resources that fuel this growth are finite, and as they dwindle, the systems we've created begin to falter. It's not just an environmental crisis. It's a crisis of ideas, of structures that were never meant to last forever. Of course, this raises a more troubling question. Is it possible that all civilizations, regardless of their form or the intelligence of their inhabitants, are doomed to this cycle of self-destruction? Do we see a pattern throughout history because it's simply an inherent trait of all complex societies, or is it that every society faces the same obstacles and challenges? Perhaps this is an essential part of the human experience, to create something magnificent, only for it to eventually fall apart. But then again, perhaps this is not the end. Perhaps the collapse of one civilization is simply a prelude to the rise of another. Maybe, just as the end of one era marks the beginning of another, there are lessons to be learned from the ruins of the past. After all, some of the greatest advancements in human history have emerged in the wake of disaster. The fall of the Roman Empire gave birth to the Renaissance, a period of rebirth and rediscovery. In a sense, civilization never truly dies. It transforms, reinvents itself, and begins anew, albeit in a different form. This, however, leaves us with one final lingering thought. What if the fall of a civilization isn't the end of the story at all? What if, instead of viewing self-destruction as a fatal flaw, we see it as part of a larger, ongoing process? Could there be an endless cycle of growth and decay, each cycle building upon the last in a grand pattern of evolutionary progress? As we ponder this, we might consider the strange possibility that perhaps self-destruction isn't something that defines humanity alone. If other civilizations have existed in the distant past, as some theories suggest, could they have encountered the same fate? Could they have seen the same patterns emerge and ultimately succumb to their own creations? And what if, just like us, they had the same drive, the same thirst to create, to grow, to evolve, only to be undone by the very forces they had unleashed? What if the story of all civilizations, whether past, present, or future, is not one of ultimate triumph or failure, but of an endless dance between creation and destruction? As these thoughts linger, we find ourselves asking not whether all civilizations self-destruct, but whether the very act of being alive, of being part of a civilization, is itself an expression of both creation and entropy, an inevitable cycle of growth, decay, and rebirth. And if that's the case, what does it mean for our own mortality? The concept of entropy, of inevitability, touches on something deeply profound. It is as if the universe itself is asking whether we can truly ever escape the fate of all that has come before us, or if we too are merely another part of a grand, cyclical journey. The answers, as we'll soon explore, might lie in how we understand meaning in mortality itself. There's something profoundly humbling about the inevitability of endings. As humans, we often search for meaning in the brief span of our lives, clinging to the idea that our actions and creations will persist, leaving a mark on time. But when we gaze into the vast abyss of deep history, we begin to understand that what seems so significant today may one day fade into a forgotten whisper. What happens to the meaning of a civilization once it has vanished? Can it still resonate, even in absence? And what if our place in history isn't as unique as we imagine, but is instead part of a broader, repeating cycle? Imagine a stone tossed into a still pond. The ripples spread outward, fading slowly until they disappear, leaving no trace. At first glance, this seems like an apt metaphor for human civilization, the brief yet intense burst of influence we have, stretching out into the future. But unlike the ripples, the stone doesn't simply vanish. Over millennia, its shape erodes, changing under the pressure of wind, water, and time. Could it be that civilizations, too, leave behind not just traces of their existence, but lasting echoes that ripple through the future in ways we may never fully comprehend? This question becomes even more compelling when we consider the potential for earlier civilizations lost in the depths of time. If there were societies long before ours, as the Silurian Hypothesis suggests, their legacy might be buried, unread, and waiting to be uncovered. But as much as we hope to find meaning in their remnants, the mere act of discovery may not guarantee understanding. Could their meaning survive their memory, or would the sheer weight of time have eroded it beyond recognition? In a world where meaning is often tied to human experience, it's easy to imagine that once a civilization fades, so too does its significance. We project ourselves onto the past, believing that the markers we leave, our art, our monuments, our stories, are the building blocks of eternity. Yet, what happens when those markers are lost? A civilization that no longer has a voice might still have a pulse, faint and subtle, lying in the deep currents of time. But in order to uncover it, we must reckon with the possibility that our methods of understanding the past might be limited, skewed by our own biases, and confined by the very language we use to interpret the world. Perhaps it's not the loss of memory that challenges us the most, but the loss of context. The meanings of past civilizations can be buried under centuries of shifting cultures, languages, and technologies. A painting, once a reflection of a society's greatest values, might now be misunderstood as nothing more than an artistic expression. A tool used in daily life could become an artifact of mystery, with no one left to understand its original purpose. We struggle to make meaning out of artifacts when the stories they tell have slipped away into the fog of time. But what if the act of forgetting itself isn't the end? Could meaning persist, even if it no longer speaks in a language we recognize? Imagine a future archaeologist standing before the remnants of our own civilization, unsure of what to make of the crumbling ruins, the scattered digital footprints, and the strange objects we leave behind. Could the civilization that comes after us find meaning in our existence? Or would they too be left to reconstruct the story from fragments, never truly grasping the full picture? Perhaps we've underestimated the resilience of meaning itself. The human drive to create, to leave behind something that endures, isn't a futile endeavor. Even when we're gone, the echoes of our presence might reverberate in the world in ways we never imagined. Like a song whose melody drifts through the air long after the last note has played, meaning can take on a life of its own. It can persist in the undercurrents of time, waiting to be rediscovered by those who know how to listen. In the absence of a first civilization, we may find that our place in history is not as the originators of progress, but as a continuation of something larger, a cycle of creation, destruction, and rebirth. The realization that we are not first doesn't diminish our significance. It may, in fact, deepen it. For if we are part of a long, unwritten story, where does our chapter fit? What role do we play in the ongoing narrative of life on Earth? And how might we, in our own brief span, create meaning that endures beyond our time? It's tempting to cling to the idea that our civilization is the pinnacle of human achievement. But what if we are not the final answer, but a momentary part of an ongoing dialogue? What if our purpose is not to be the first, but to carry forward the lessons and legacies of those who came before us and those who will follow? The search for meaning, then, becomes less about proving our uniqueness and more about understanding the ways in which we are connected to everything that has ever been. This realization, while humbling, opens up new avenues for reflection. It suggests that the true meaning of civilization may lie not in its singularity, but in its continuity, in the patterns it shares with those who preceded it and those who will come after. As we ponder these questions, it's important to remember that civilization itself, with all its triumphs and failures, is a story in progress. We're not writing the final chapter, but rather adding our voice to an ongoing narrative that stretches far beyond our understanding. The mysteries of what came before and what will come after us remain tantalizingly out of reach, but they also push us toward a deeper understanding of who we are and where we're headed. After all, as civilizations rise and fall, so too do our understandings of life, death, and meaning evolve. And in this way, the end of one story may simply be the beginning of another. What if, instead of fearing the eventual decline of civilization, we embrace it as part of the natural rhythm of existence? In that acceptance, we find peace and perhaps the meaning we seek. And so, with that in mind, the search for meaning continues, threading through the lives of those who come after us. But what if, in the end, meaning isn't something we need to find at all? What if it's something that quietly finds us, nestled in the gaps between all we've ever known? Perhaps, as we turn to think about the future, we'll discover that the true question isn't whether we will leave something meaningful behind, but whether the meaning we find is enough for the moment we are living in now.